Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep. Welcome to another session on internal security. In yesterday's class, we were talking about the Khalistan movement. We understood the origin of the movement, the background, the entire history. We were discussing how India almost wiped out this movement in the 1980s and 1990s. So let's continue the discussion from here. Let us understand what strategies, what tactics were adopted by the Indian government to target the Khalistan movement. I'll be discussing the countermeasures initiated by India to tackle the Khalistan movement between 1980s and 1990s. This is a very important part of the discussion. Once we understand this, then we can talk about the last topic, that is the current status of Khalistan movement, the current developments that have happened in the last few years. That can be discussed in detail. So let's start with the response of India. How did India counter the dangerous Khalistan movement? So, yesterday you understood that India was facing multiple challenges with regard to Khalistan movement. There was a lot of domestic support in Punjab, especially after Operation Blue Star and the anti-Sikh riots. There was external state support coming from Pakistan, from across the border. There was support within sections of the Sikh diaspora in foreign countries. And certain Western governments, they were tolerating Khalistan extremism on their soil. They were not acting up against them, and they were not ready to help India. They were not cooperating with India. So these were the four challenges that India had. First, we had to target the domestic support base that existed in Punjab, that is within India. Second, we had to somehow cut off external state support that was coming from Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. This was the second challenge. Third was to tackle the support from diaspora, especially in European countries like UK, Germany, etc. Then in Canada, in United States, etc. And finally, India had to pressurize Western governments which were not cooperating with India. So these were the four major challenges that lied ahead of India. Please make a note of this. Because even today, somewhat the same challenges exist. So how did India overcome these challenges? To tackle the domestic threat, to tackle the support base that existed in Punjab, a lot of initiatives were taken up. The Punjab State Police would lead this fight against the Khalistan movement. Because obviously, fighting any local insurgency and terrorism becomes the primary responsibility of the state police. There were a lot of reforms carried out within the Punjab police. Restructuring of the Punjab police was done, and many top officials were brought in. Top IPS officers were brought in to give new leadership to the Punjab State Police. I'm sure many of you would have heard about legendary IPS officers such as KPS Gill. KPS Gill was made the DGP of the state to head the state police. Several top IPS officers with experience in counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, such as Julio Ribeiro, were also brought into Punjab police. So under their leadership, the Punjab police implemented a very effective counterinsurgency strategy. And to empower the security forces, The AFSPA was extended in Punjab by declaring Punjab as a disturbed area. As the conflict had completely destabilized Punjab, it was declared as a disturbed area under the Disturbed Areas Act. This is a precondition that is needed to implement AFSPA. In any conflict zone, if AFSPA has to be implemented, first that area has to be declared as a disturbed area. So, by declaring Punjab as a disturbed area, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act was implemented. This would give tremendous powers to the security forces. The Punjab police, the central forces, the armed forces, if they are deployed, all the security forces which are fighting insurgency and terrorism in a disturbed area, they will enjoy these special powers. Now, as I mentioned in a previous class, AFSPA has always been a controversial law. Some argue that laws like AFSPA are needed to empower our security forces to target insurgents and terrorists. But some criticize AFSPA because these extraordinary powers which are given can be easily misused. It could lead to large scale human right violations. Because when you give tremendous powers to police and security forces, quite often those powers can get misused. So, under the extraordinary powers of AFSPA, the Punjab police unleashed a major crackdown by launching effective counter-insurgency operations. At the local level, they tried to wipe out the support that existed in Punjab. Several top leaders, mid-leaders, the mid-level commanders of these terror groups, and even some local members, local youth, right? They became the target of these operations. These operations were conducted in coordination with Intelligence Bureau and the BSF. The Intelligence Bureau, which is responsible for domestic intelligence, would run covert operations in Punjab and along the border areas to target the local extremists. The BSF would step up border security. The BSF, which is responsible for guarding the India-Pakistan border, improved border security measures along the border to tackle the flow of funds, the flow of drugs, weapons, and even the cross-border infiltration that was taking place. Remember, we discussed yesterday that the Khalistani extremists, they could easily cross the border into Pakistan, get support from the ISI, and they would sneak back into India. So it was very essential to plug these gaps that were present along the border. So while BSF took care of border security, IB and Punjab police together, they launched major offensive operations. IB would handle the intelligence part of it, the covert operations. Punjab police would lead the counter-insurgency operations under the special powers accorded under AFSPA. So this was very, very effective in neutralizing the domestic support. Because whenever you fight such motivated local movements, it's very important to cut off the domestic support. Remember what Kautilya said about security threats? Internal threat, the enemy within, is always the biggest challenge. Because with better security approach, we can always cut off the external support, be it from Pakistan, be it from the diaspora, be it the indifference of Western countries. We can always handle that. We can tackle that with better security response. And also, external support will not have much of an impact if you end the domestic movement. So, tackling the internal problem was of utmost importance, and the credit goes to Punjab police and the IB for decimating the Khalistan outfits in India. They were demolished, they were wiped out. There were large scale killings that took place. Several Khalistani extremist terrorists were killed and neutralized. So that is why KPS Gill is credited with tackling the Khalistan threat in Punjab. He became a legendary IPS officer following these operations in the late 1980s. By 1990-1991, the domestic support base was more or less destroyed. The drug problem was tackled, if not entirely, at least The infiltration of drugs, the drug addiction in the state was also tackled. So this required a lot of coordination between the center and the state. The central government and the state government played a big role along with these security forces and agencies to neutralize the domestic support. Is that clear? Next, the second challenge. How did we tackle Pakistan? How did we push the ISI back to stop supporting the Khalistan terrorists? Under Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had taken over from his mother, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who had been assassinated by Khalistan terrorists. So as Khalistan movement became one of the biggest security threats for India, it was very essential to cut out the foreign support, especially from Pakistan. As we discussed yesterday, Pakistan had created a direct connection between the Afghan conflict and the Khalistan movement. Even before Pakistan meddled in Kashmir, because Kashmir insurgency began later in 1987. Even before Kashmir was destabilized, Punjab had been first destabilized by Pakistan. It had taken the Khalistani terrorists to the same terrorist camps that are present along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border where Afghan Mujahideen was being trained. It had conveniently diverted Western funds and weapons which were meant for Afghan Mujahideen and used them to arm Khalistani terror groups. So it was critical to impose a cost on Pakistan, to punish Pakistan in such a way that it will be forced to take a step back from backing the Khalistani outfits. So Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi authorized a series of covert classified intelligence operations led by India's Foreign Intelligence Agency. RAW, or Research and Analysis Wing, which is responsible for India's foreign intelligence operations, was authorized by the Prime Minister to lead a series of offensive covert operations targeted at Pakistan. Now, see, the government will never acknowledge these covert operations. The information is not publicly available as well. So, then how do we know about this? How come we are speaking about this in class? We know about this because there are several journalists, strategic experts, analysts, and former intelligence officers who have written about these covert operations of India. They have brought their expertise, their insight, and the access that they would have to present us a picture of what happened in late 1980s. This was the Cold War era, where countries wouldn't hesitate to do anything if needed to protect their security interests. If Pakistan was targeting India, India wouldn't sit back. India would hit back at Pakistan as well if required. And that is exactly what India did. There is a book written by a former intelligence officer known as B. Raman. B. Raman was another legendary IPS officer. When he retired, he was the head of counterterrorism at RAW. He was an IPS officer deputed with RAW, and he had personal insight into India's covert operations in the 70s and 80s. So many years after retirement, he wrote a very popular book, The Cowboys of RAW. It was a tribute to the legendary founder of RAW, R.N. Kao, Ramnath Kao, who was very close to then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi when RAW was established in 1968. So R.N. Kao or Ramnath Kao is the founder of the organization, the founding director, appointed by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1968. So he laid the foundation for Research and Analysis Wing. He led India, he led RAW during the 1971 war when India supported the Mukti Bahini rebels. So R.N. Kao was a world-renowned spy who headed Research and Analysis Wing for many years. His contribution is immense to India's foreign intelligence operations. So as a tribute to him, B. Raman wrote a book many years later, and he speaks about a few operations of India in the region. And one operation he talks about in his book is the series of covert operations that India launched at Pakistan. The goal was to cut Pakistani support to Khalistani outfits. The aim was to impose a cost on Pakistan, to punish Pakistan, so that the war becomes costlier for Pakistan. So, according to B. Raman, RAW set up two covert teams, CIT-J and CIT-X, Counterintelligence Team J, Counterintelligence Team X. These were two elite, highly classified covert units. They don't exist officially. The government will never say that these units were set up, right? In fact, government doesn't even speak about RAW and IB and their operations, right? So the government never acknowledges that these covert units were created, even today, because these are highly classified, secretive operations. We can't take credit for that, because that would be illegal under international law. Conducting such operations on foreign soil is illegal under international law. So there will be negative consequences. So these operations have to remain secret at least for a certain period of time. In some countries, there is a policy of declassification, like in US, in UK. After 30, 40 years, they declassify the documents and they let the world and public know regarding some of the covert operations. But in India, we don't have a declassification policy. So we get to know only through such accounts of former officials, strategic experts, investigative journalists, etc. So according to B. Raman, he provides a very authentic account, which has been verified by other experts as well, that RAW established these two covert teams, and their specific goal was to target Khalistani terrorists hiding in Pakistan. When I say target, it means to kill, it means to neutralize them. The aim of the other team, the task of the other team, was to target the links between ISI and Khalistan groups, and if required, to even conduct tit for tat bombings in Pakistan, so that the Pakistani government comes under pressure. If there is an attack in India, there would be a counter attack in a Pakistani city targeting the civilian population. So these serious measures were taken up to impose a high cost on Pakistan. The goal was very simple. We will not be like Pakistan. We will not blindly sponsor terrorism or extremism. We will be very precise. We will launch these targeted hits at the ISI, at the Khalistani terror leaders, and at Pakistani cities, so that the cost becomes unbearable for Pakistan. The idea was to bring Pakistan under pressure. So after a few years, this strategy worked for India. Several Khalistani terrorists and leaders were eliminated. They started falling one by one under mysterious circumstances. They would be shot by masked gunmen, poisoned, or they would die under mysterious circumstances. A few ISI officers as well, and Pakistani army officials who were in touch with the Khalistani extremists, they were targeted. There would be counter bombings, tit for tat attacks in Pakistani cities. So this eventually put a lot of pressure on Pakistan, according to B. Raman. And eventually, the ISI reached out to RAW for a mediation, for a settlement. The ISI was feeling the heat from India as well. If Pakistan could hit India, India could hit Pakistan as well. So this strategy, even though a risky strategy, did bear results for India. So as the violence kept increasing in the region, the king of Jordan, who was a good friend of Rajiv Gandhi and also a good friend of the Pakistani army general, he offered to mediate between the two intelligence agencies. Jordan, I hope you know, is a West Asian country, right? Jordan is close to India. Jordan is close to Pakistan as well. The king of Jordan was a good friend of Rajiv Gandhi, very close friend. and he had a good relationship with the Pakistani leadership as well. So he offered Amman as a neutral location for a negotiation between ISI and RAW. Amman is the capital of Jordan. So, with the mediation of Jordan, the chief of ISI and the chief of RAW met secretly in Amman and they worked out a settlement. It was very simple. RAW would scale back its covert operations if the ISI stops backing Khalistani outfits. This deal was reached in Amman, and this helped in bringing down the Pakistani support. If not entirely, at least major part of Pakistani support went down after this. So by 1989, 1990, the Pakistani covert support almost came to an end. At least for that period, it came to an end. Is that clear? So this is how India put a pressure on Pakistan. It put a cost on Pakistan to cut off that state support coming in for the Khalistani outfits. So understanding this is very important. But however, you can't openly write about this in your exams. You can't say that RAW carried out tit for tat bombings in Pakistani cities, that we carried out assassinations in Pakistan, because these are never acknowledged by the government. So it can't come as your opinion. But you can mention B. Raman. You can say that according to B. Raman, in his book, The Cowboys of RAW, India did launch a series of covert operations. You need not go into the details. You don't have to mention CITJ, CITX. You don't have to mention that we neutralized the terrorists, we carried out counterattacks. You don't have to mention any details. You can just say that to put pressure on Pakistan and to impose a cost on Pakistan. B. Raman says that in his book, India also, through RAW, carried out a series of covert operations in Pakistan to put pressure on the Khalistan movement and the Pakistani state support. That one line is enough, one statement, which is diplomatic, is more than enough. All right? Now let us see how India tackled the threat in Western countries. How did we tackle the support within the diaspora? How did we deal with the Western governments? So we discussed yesterday that in several countries, Gurudwaras were being misused for Khalistan activities. Several Khalistani leaders who had taken shelter in Western countries, who had run away from India, they were turning sacred Gurudwaras into their terror bases. All right? And here as well, Pakistan's ISI was involved. Pakistan would be providing the required financial support, diplomatic support needed on foreign soil through their high commissions, consulates, and embassies. They were extending this support to some of the radical sections amongst the Sikh diaspora. Again, not everyone was radicalized. At least a major section of the diaspora had been radicalized after Operation Blue Star and the anti-Sikh riots. So it was very important to ensure that we pulled the diaspora away from these activities and mainly put some pressure on the Khalistani elements in foreign countries. But what we did in Pakistan could not be so easily replicated in Western countries, because be it Canada, US, or European countries, they wouldn't take it lying down if India was running targeted assassination campaigns in their soil. Right? That would become extremely controversial. That too at that period, during that era, where we had a very bad relationship with Western countries. So carrying out such operations was out of the question. So this required the combined effort of Ministry of External Affairs and RAW to keep a check on the activities happening within the diaspora. It required us to build contacts within the community, to cultivate the pro-India members of the diaspora, because there will be many members, majority of them were still pro-India. So we had to cultivate them, we had to work with them so that we could get intelligence on these extremists. We could get specific information which we could then share with Western governments to show them that, look, These terrorists are operating on your soil. They are using this to target us, and you're still tolerating them. You're not acting against them. So this would bring diplomatic pressure on Western governments. So research and analysis wing was very active in foreign countries as well, in US, Canada, and European countries. They kept a close watch on the community through their covert operations. But the aim here was largely intelligence gathering and influence operations. That is, we'll try to influence the diaspora leaders, the moderate leaders. Will gain their support, will gain their trust. Through them, we will bring pressure on the Khalistani extremists. The community leaders can urge the youth to stay away from this path. They can guide the youth amongst the diaspora on the right path to stay away from extremism. Right? They could pass information to the Ministry of External Affairs and RAW. We could use this to build diplomatic pressure on Western governments. So this strategy was working to an extent, but not entirely, because even though we managed to contain the diaspora, the foreign governments were not very cooperative. US, Canada, especially, even UK to an extent. They were not very cooperative. They didn't care about India's problems. Even when we gave evidence to them to show that their funds and weapons given to Afghan Mujahideen was being found in the hands of Khalistani groups, which clearly meant Pakistan was the one diverting them. Even when India presented this evidence, US, UK, and others, they ignored this. They didn't bother about this because we were on the side of the Soviet Union, right? It took one disastrous tragedy for these governments to wake up. The bombing of Air Kanishka. Air Kanishka was a Air India flight coming from Canada to India. All right? A terrorist group known as Babar Khalsa International, BKI, which had built a strong base in Canada, planned a major terror attack against Air India. The plan was to target two Air India flights. One was coming from Canada to India, the other flight was coming from Japan to India. These terrorists, they were looking to smuggle bombs and place them on board these two flights. Fortunately, the flight from Japan was saved because the bombs exploded at the airport itself in Japan. Before the terrorists could board the aircraft and place it on the aircraft, luckily the bomb exploded at the airport in Japan, injuring few people, and that aircraft got saved. But Air Kanishka was not so lucky. This Air India flight coming from Canada to India via Europe was bombed by Khalistani terrorists and it dropped into the Atlantic Ocean. It had a stopover in Europe before coming to India. More than 300 passengers and crew members were killed. Many were Indian citizens. There were many Canadian citizens and several American, European citizens as well. This is when foreign governments woke up to the threat posed by Khalistani terror groups. When Khalistani attack happened, when Air Kanishka bombing happened, this was the biggest of its kind. This was the biggest air incident involving a terrorist attack. Before 9/11 attacks happened by Al Qaeda, this remained the biggest act of terrorism with regard to civilian airlines. So this pushed Canada, US, European intelligence agencies to finally cooperate with India. They gave some cooperation. Their intelligence and law enforcement agencies, they started cracking down on Khalistani outfits on their soil. Not because a flight had been bombed, because their own citizens had been killed. When it pinched them, that is when they cooperated with India. That is when they gave some degree of cooperation that helped in weakening the foreign support amongst the diaspora. We didn't wipe it out entirely because the support was very limited from them. And That's why many of the former Khalistani terrorists, they became dormant in Western countries. They only stopped their activities for the time being. Today, the revival that you are seeing is largely led by these elements who were left behind. Many of the terrorists, they switched, they stopped being involved in these terror activities because of pressure from India and the Western governments. They took up different jobs, different identities, they changed their names, everything, right? They lied low for 10, 15 years and they took up other work and they even got involved in organized crime, etc. But today we are seeing that many of those remnants who existed, they are directly involved in today's attempt to revive the Khalistan movement. Is that clear? So it was through this strategy that India saw success in neutralizing the Khalistan movement in 1990s. By 1995, Khalistan movement was not even in the picture. That was India's success in this fight against Khalistan movement. That is how effective Indian operations were. Is that clear? It took a combined effort from the state police to central intelligence agencies to the foreign ministry, right? All these stakeholders played an important role in clamping down this movement. So please note that the movement was not dead. It was not completely eliminated. No terrorist movement can be entirely wiped out. Like LTT in Sri Lanka, for example, right? It is still dormant. There is a possibility of LTT reviving in Sri Lanka. Similarly, Khalistan movement, even though we had weakened it by 1995, right? It remained dormant, meaning it could be revived, it could be reactivated in the future. Because there were still many elements spread out in foreign countries. Even though we had tackled the movement largely in India, the presence of these elements abroad would remain a future challenge for India. Understood? Now, let's talk about the present scenario. Let's quickly discuss what's happening in the last 13 years. See, I've been teaching this from almost 9, 10 years. And every time I've pointed out to the possible risk of the revival of Khalistan movement. You might be hearing about the Khalistani activities in the last 1 or 2 years, right? Because those activities have picked up and right now it's dominating headlines. But 5 years ago, 7 years ago, not much attention was being paid to the attempt to revive the Khalistan movement. But the signs were there, the signs were very clear. The government of India has been watching this. The Indian government, the experts, right? And those who are involved in this domain. We have been seeing the attempt to revive Khalistan movement at least since 2010. So it didn't happen overnight. It didn't start with Amritpal Singh. It didn't start with the last few months. It's been happening for the last few years. There is a well-planned attempt, an orchestrated attempt in India and abroad to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. So why is it happening? Why after 2010? Experts have an analysis. According to several experts, the 26/11 Mumbai attacks in 2008 was a turning point. This clearly was India's biggest terror attack, sponsored by Pakistan, carried out by Lashkar-e-Toiba. Following the Mumbai attacks, Pakistan has been under tremendous international pressure since then. The then Manmohan Singh government unleashed coercive diplomacy against Pakistan to target Pakistan and bring international diplomatic pressure. In the Mumbai attacks, again, Americans were targeted, Israelis were targeted, Europeans were targeted. So finally, Western countries started looking at groups like Lashkar as a global threat. Because Lashkar, Jaish-e-Mohammed, they are connected closely with Al-Qaeda, with Afghan Taliban, with Haqqani network. So Western countries started getting closer to India from 2001 onwards, after the 9/11 attacks. After the 9/11 attacks by Al-Qaeda, the US realized that it couldn't trust Pakistan entirely. It needed a reliable counter-terrorism partner in the region, and that was India. So since 2001, India-US relations transformed. We became strategic partners. We built very close defense, security, and intelligence relations. And our intelligence law enforcement agencies, they started working together. They started sharing information, running joint operations. So as a result, India-US relations had improved. Our ties with Canada had improved. Our ties with European countries had improved. Because the Cold War had ended long back, right? We were witnessing the rise of India and growing alignment of India with Western countries. But even after Western countries got closer to India, they were still hesitant to act against Pakistan and against Pakistan sponsored terrorism. In 2004, 2006, when there were major attacks against India by Lashkar and Jaish, Western countries didn't put enough pressure on Pakistan. But Mumbai attacks was a turning point. When their citizens were targeted in India by Pakistani terrorists, they again realized that they have to work with India, that they have to put international pressure on Pakistan. Since then, Pakistan has been under tremendous pressure. We have brought pressure not just from US and European countries, we have also used international platforms like United Nations, the Financial Action Task Force or FATF, and other global bodies to target Pakistan. Through this coercive diplomacy, we have firmly established Pakistan's involvement in sponsoring terrorism against India. We conducted effective investigations into the Mumbai attacks. We clearly brought out evidence linking the terrorists with the ISI, with the Pakistani state. That link was clearly proven by India after the Mumbai attacks. This is something that foreign governments and global institutions couldn't ignore. So since then, there has been a lot of international pressure on Pakistan to stop attacking Indian cities, to stop targeting Indian civilians on that scale. Because back then, there was a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to retaliate by going to war with Pakistan, by launching attacks against Pakistan. But India showed a lot of restraint. We held back because we knew that that wouldn't be the right option. If India had retaliated at that point, if we had declared war on Pakistan for Mumbai attacks, or if we had launched a major military operation targeting Pakistan, then we would have turned the sympathy towards Pakistan. India would have lost that sympathy. We would be in Israel's position where Israel is today. If you compare this with Israel-Hamas situation, which has happened in the last 2 months, on 7th October, Hamas carried out a brutal terror attack against Israel, killing 1,000 plus innocent Israeli civilians. There was global shock and anger against Hamas. Global sympathy was with Israel. But what did Israel do? Instead of targeted operations against Hamas and bringing international pressure against Hamas, it declared an all-out war on Gaza. It triggered a disproportionate war, launching major military strikes on Gaza, killing civilians, Palestinian civilians. Today, 18, 20,000 Palestinians are dead. And today, the global perception has changed. Except for US, not a single country is standing with Israel today. The narrative has changed. The Palestinian issue is at the forefront. So Israel has lost the narrative war. It's being accused of war crimes, genocide, and human rights violations. If India had done that mistake back then, we would be in a similar situation. As two nuclear-armed neighboring countries, if India had gone to war, we would have served Pakistan's agenda. Global sympathy would have gone towards Pakistan. India would be put on the back foot. There would be pressure on India to scale back the war. It would have derailed our growth at a critical time. In 2008, the global economy was going through a recession. Any such conflict would have dragged the Indian economy down. We wouldn't be the major emerging economy that we are today. It would have drained our resources, our efforts. And more importantly, there were other options through which we could target Pakistan, which would be more effective. This is coercive diplomacy to bring international pressure and targeted covert operations to hit the terrorist outfits. So following Mumbai attacks, this is exactly what India did. because the Mumbai attacks was carried out for a reason. Pakistan wanted to trigger India. Pakistan was facing an internal crisis in 2008. Many terror groups had rebelled against Pakistani ISI and the army. They were not happy with the ISI and the army. It had created divisions within Pakistan. There was a possibility that the terrorist groups could unite to target Pakistani state itself. So Pakistani army and ISI, they desperately needed a reason to unite all these terror groups again by creating a common enemy. And who better than India? So Pakistan planned the Mumbai attacks very carefully. It had to be a major sophisticated attack to trigger India so that if India responds, even with a limited strike, that is enough to project India as an immediate enemy. And that will unite all the anti-India forces, thus bringing back stability in Pakistan, thus giving ISI and the army full control over the terror groups. India, which knew this very well, decided to hold back. Despite the media pressure, the public pressure, and opposition pressure, India showed restraint because we knew that if we hit Pakistan in any way, either through limited strikes or even with a full-fledged war, we would be suffering few months later, not Pakistan. So instead, a better strategy was used, that was coercive diplomacy to bring international pressure and better security on India's part, better intelligence operations on India's part, even covert operations if required to target the terror groups in Pakistan. So today, this strategy has given better results for India. It has been continued and even improved upon by the Modi government. If you look at how the Modi government has responded, it's a continuation of this policy in a more refined and better manner. After the Uri attacks, India didn't go to war with Pakistan. We carried out a precision surgical strike. After the Pulwama attacks, we carried out Balkot airstrikes targeting terror camps, not civilians. We didn't hit cities and civilians like Israel is doing, right? We hit terror camps in Balkot and we stopped. We clearly put a stop to it. We told Pakistan that we don't want to escalate. We are not looking for a bigger conflict. Our goal was to hit terror camps. So with this limited use of force, along with coercive diplomacy and covert operations, today India has cornered Pakistan and there is a lot of pressure on Pakistan. Is that clear? And the global community made it clear to Pakistan that if there is another attack on an Indian city or an attack on Indian civilian population, then they will not hold India back. Meaning India might hit Pakistan, India might even go to war if Indian civilians are killed on such a large scale, if another city in India is hit on this scale. So this has pushed Pakistan to stop using Lashkar, Jaish and other groups to target Indian cities, to target Indian civilian population. Have you ever wondered why there has not been a major attack in India after 2008? Now, some of you might have questions. You might say that, sir, how come you're saying there are no terror attacks? There have been so many attacks in the recent past. Yes, there have been many attacks, but most of the attacks are targeting the military installations of India, not cities. Of course, there will be exceptions. There might be minor incidents here and there, but we haven't witnessed a major terror attack on an Indian city targeting Indian civilian population after 26/11. This is not by accident. It's not just a coincidence. There's a reason behind it. The international pressure exerted by India, right, and the course of diplomacy of India has worked. Pakistan is in no position to target cities and civilians. So does this mean Pakistan has ended its covert war against India? No, definitely no. Pakistan would not be bothered by this. Of course, it has been under pressure to not target cities and civilians, but it has come up with two new strategies to target India. See, Pakistan is obsessed with India. It will never end the covert war. Remember, it has sworn to bleed India through 1,000 cuts. Just because there is pressure on Pakistan, it will not stop the covert war. It will do it in a different way. So now that Pakistan can't freely target Indian cities and civilians by using groups like Lashkar and Jaish, it is using the same groups to target military installations of India, especially near the disputed border. That is why a series of attacks have happened against military sites, military bases. The attack at Gurdaspur near the Punjab-Pakistan border, the Pathankot Air Base attack in 2014, the Uri attacks in 2016, which is very close to the line of control, the Pulwama attacks again in Kashmir. Like this, there have been a series of attacks on Indian military sites, that too near the border and disputed region. And these attacks will not get the same sympathy from the global community. This will not bring the same kind of pressure on Pakistan. There is a difference between attacking military sites and civilian targets. Is that clear? So Pakistan has stayed away from attacking cities and civilians. Instead, it has used the terror groups to hit military sites. That is one new strategy of Pakistan. The other new strategy is to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. Understood? So this analysis is very, very important. This explains the revival of Khalistan movement. Now, why did I explain all of this? Why did I give you the backstory? It's important because there could be a question. Why are we witnessing a revival of Khalistan movement, which was dormant, which we had almost ended in 1990s? It's because of this. Is that clear? Pakistan needed a new strategy to hit India, to continue its covert war against India. Since it was under international pressure to not use Lashkar, Jaish and other groups which are based out of Pakistan, the global community knows that these terror groups are based in Pakistan. So Pakistan has been under pressure to not use these terrorist organizations to target Indian cities and civilians. All right? So as a result, it has adopted two new strategies from 2010 onwards. One is to use these groups to target military installations near the border, especially in Kashmir. Then the same questions will not arise. The same sympathy will not be there for India. Right? Even when we retaliate, global countries will pressurize both India, Pakistan to step back and not go into a war. And the second strategy is to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. These are the new strategies that Pakistan has been using in the last 13, 14 years. So Pakistan has worked with the radicalized members amongst the diaspora who were dormant for 15, 20 years. They have been supported by Pakistan again. In Western countries and in several foreign countries, some radicalized members of the diaspora who were still present, right? They have been in touch with Pakistan's ISI, and India has evidence for that. We can again prove the ISI's link with the attempt to revive the Khalistan movement primarily in foreign countries. The attempt has been made in India as well. Even in Punjab, an attempt has been made to revive various terror groups like Babar Khalsa International, Khalistan Tiger Force, Khalistan Zindabad and Khalistan Commando Force. Many of these groups have become active in the last few years. They've tried planning attacks as well in India and carried out few attacks as well. There have been many, many disturbing incidents that have taken place. Let me just give you a summary of this, what has happened and what is the current situation. First, let's understand the distribution of the Sikh diaspora today. See, back in 80s, the Sikh diaspora was mainly concentrated in Canada, in US, and in Western European countries. But today, the distribution of the diaspora has changed. They are not just present in Canada, US, UK, Germany, etc. They are also present in quite significant numbers in France, Belgium, Italy, Australia, New Zealand, in Dubai, and across some West Asian countries, and also in Southeast Asian countries like Thailand and Philippines, Malaysia and Singapore. So today the Sikh community is much more spread out than before. They have a bigger and wider presence, and a few sections of them are radicalized. Some of them are remnants from the 80s who had stopped these extremist activities, right? They had resumed other works, they had left extremism, or at least they had assumed false identities and stayed away from it because of the pressure on them. But now, mainly through social media, these extremist forces have been mobilized again. The previous Khalistani leaders that were present, who were hiding in foreign countries, they have been trying to reactivate the former members. And there is a clear, visible role of the ISI in these efforts. The ISI has been working with these organizations again from across the border in Punjab, in European countries, in US and Canada, and in many other countries. Italy has become a major base. Australia, New Zealand, UAE, Thailand, Philippines, they have emerged as major centers as well, where there is a presence of Khalistani extremists. Is that clear? Now, let me list out a few incidents that have happened in the recent past. A few years ago, the Cricket World Cup was being held in England. England was hosting the ICC Cricket World Cup. There was a very important match, a high profile match involving India at Lord's in London. In this match, when the cricket match was taking place, a small aircraft flew over the stadium 2, 3 times, and it was flying a flag calling for free Khalistan. This was a deliberate attempt by the Khalistani elements present in Britain to publicize the Khalistan issue at the global stage. This was telecast live during the Cricket World Cup match. This is just one example I'm giving you. On social media, on Twitter, Facebook, Telegram, Instagram, there has been a very planned, orchestrated campaign which has been going on to spread fake news, to spread misinformation against India, and to revive the Khalistan ideology. The goal is to target the new generation of the Sikh youth in the diaspora community. Because, see, the present generation may not be aware of what happened in the 80s. Even Indians, right? They don't know much about the Khalistan movement. Before the recent events, not many of them knew about what happened in the 80s. Growing up, how many of you had heard about Khalistan movement in your school days, college days? I'm sure many of you wouldn't know about it because it was a dead, dormant movement. The same would be the case with the youth amongst the Sikh diaspora as well. But today, there is a high degree of radicalization that we have noticed among sections of the Sikh youth in the diaspora community. So who's teaching them? It's not their family, not their parents, because they're all pro-India. Majority of the Sikh diaspora members are pro-India, they're peaceful, they're moderate. They don't support Khalistan ideology. Then how come their children are falling prey to it? How come teenagers, young adults are falling prey to this? It's because there is a campaign on social media which has been going on from many years. Social media can be very effective in manipulating your thought, your opinions. These extremists, with the backing of Pakistan, they have been using videos of Operation Blue Star, videos of anti-Sikh riots to brainwash the current generation. Yes, what happened in anti-Sikh riots was highly unfortunate, a big tragedy for India. But it's an old story. Using that to radicalize a new generation of youth is unacceptable. And that is what these extremists have been doing. If you guys pay attention on your Instagram, on your YouTube channels, on your other social media handles, you will come across several pages, right, which are subtly promoting Khalistani agenda. I don't know how many of you have noticed this. A cultural element is being brought in to popularize the Khalistan movement. From Punjabi songs to promoting the gun culture, the culture of violence, and even selling Khalistani merchandise online. All these activities have been noted by Indian intelligence agencies. As you know, Punjabi pop culture is very popular. I'm sure all of us love Punjabi songs, right? But there are few artists, few musicians in India and abroad who have taken either an open pro Khalistan stand or at least a subtle pro Khalistan stand. Through their songs, through the pop culture, gun violence, the culture of engaging in violence has been promoted. Parallelly, there is a rise in organized crime involving Punjabi gangs. Several Sikh youth in India and abroad have gotten involved in organized criminal activities. There are few notorious criminal organizations today operating in India, in Canada, and many countries, which are involved in various criminal activities that associate themselves with the Khalistani cause. For example, you might have heard about Lawrence Bishnoi gang, the Arshdeep gang. These are just a few examples I'm giving you. Lawrence Bishnoi is a notorious criminal. He is currently in jail. He's in Tihar. But from jail, he has been running his operations. Arshdeep and others, there are many other criminals who are involved in criminal activities in India and abroad, from drug smuggling to arms smuggling, extortion. All these criminal activities are being carried out, very similar to how Dawood Ibrahim gang used to function, how Chota Shakil, Chota Rajan used to function. The Bombay underworld, the notorious Bombay underworld, which eventually contributed to Pakistan-sponsored terrorism against India, that is being replicated in the case of Khalistan movement. There are many criminal organizations operating in Canada, operating in Europe, and many other parts of the world which have ties in India. They have the ability to threaten people and extort money from them, to be involved in property deals, to make up money from land mafias, to carry out contract killings or supari killings, targeted assassinations. So such criminal activity associated with few members of Sikh community and Sikh diaspora has increased. And you find a close connection between the pop culture, the gun violence, the Khalistani merchandise being sold online, and with the criminal activities taking place on the ground. Is that clear? If you want, you can experiment here. You can go to Instagram and try to see if there are any such pages which are selling Khalistani merchandise. You'll come across hoodies, jackets, and etc. They carry a lot of symbols associated with Khalistan ideology. The Khalistani flag, the Khalistani symbols are depicted, and they are being bought in large numbers abroad by the youth in amongst the Sikh diaspora. Right? So this is the attempt being created online, and a call was given as well to hold a referendum. Many such referendums have taken place in the recent times. A referendum is basically like a direct election where people come and vote and express their choice. Right? So Khalistani extremists, they called for a 2020 referendum on social media. It was an online voting in an attempt to push for the creation of Khalistan, to break Punjab away from India. Of course, it has no validity. Nobody will recognize it. But still, the fact that they went ahead and held this online referendum itself is a significant concern for India. Then, believe it or not, recently in Italy, in northern Italy, there are a lot of Sikh workers. There's a very strong diaspora community. A physical referendum was held in northern Italy in multiple cities. Physical elections were held where people were encouraged to come and vote for Khalistan. Again, it has no recognition, no validity, but still, the act, that too in a foreign country, represents a threat for India. Is that clear? So these are the various events that we have been seeing. There have been pro Khalistan rallies held abroad. There are cases filed against Indian government accusing of genocide with regard to the anti-Sikh riots of 1984. So many such incidents have taken place. Then came the farmers' protest against the farm laws that happened recently. The controversial farm laws passed by the Modi government was supposed to have a negative impact on Punjabi farmers and farmers around the country. So this led to massive protests. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. It's a recent development. There were large-scale protests by the farmers, especially from Punjab. They reached the outskirts of Delhi as well. They camped on the outskirts of Delhi, trying to put pressure on the Modi government. Eventually, the Modi government accepted that the farm laws are not in the interest of the farmers, and it withdrew the laws as well. But these protests, even though it was a genuine farmer-led protest, it was infiltrated by Khalistani elements. Khalistani elements infiltrated the farmers' protests. They brought a bad name to it, even though it was a genuine organic protest of the farmers to fight for their rights. Khalistani elements, mainly from abroad, and India suspects a Pakistani involvement here. All right, there is a foreign element involved. There is another notorious Khalistani group called Sikhs for Justice, based out of US and Canada. This group calls itself as a NGO, as a social group working for social causes, and calls itself as a non-government organization. It is headed by Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He's a American Canadian citizen. He has a dual citizenship of US and Canada. He calls himself a lawyer activist. From many years, he has been filing cases against India in foreign countries, in foreign jurisdiction. We know him from a very long time. He was just a minor irritant then. But today, he has become the face of the Khalistan movement. As the leader of SFJ, this outfit, along with few others, like Khalistan Tiger Force, Babar Khalsa International, and others, they were allegedly directly involved in the farmers' protests. They managed to channel some funds, bring some elements to Punjab as well, to instigate violence, to turn the movement into a violent movement, to use this as a revival strategy to bring back the Khalistan movement in India. All right, this was one major attempt that we noticed, but of course, it didn't succeed entirely. Then came a group called Waris Punjab De. Have you heard about it? Can you tell me in the comments? Have you heard about this group called Waris Punjab De? This group was formed in the backdrop of the farmers' protests. When the farmers' protest was going on, there was a very popular individual. You guys tell me his name. A very popular singer and actor, a Punjabi singer and actor. He established a group called Waris Punjab De. What's his name? Very good. Deep Sidhu. Deep Sidhu, who is quite popular in Punjabi cultural scene in the song and movie industry, he established Waris Punjab De as again an NGO, as a social group to help the farmers. But as you know, Deep Sidhu himself was killed later. He was killed again because of the gang rivalry that has taken root amongst the youth in Punjab and amongst the diaspora abroad. There is a clear connection here with organized criminal groups and terrorist organizations. So, most likely, Deep Sidhu was assassinated. And later, all of a sudden, what took India by surprise was Waris Punjab Day, which was just like a social organization established by Deep Sidhu, was taken over by some random individual based out of Dubai. And who is this guy? This was Amritpal Singh, a truck driver from Punjab. He had migrated to UAE as a truck driver. He was working as a truck driver. He became very popular as a social media influencer during the farmers' protests. When the farmers' protests were going on, some of these Khalistani radical elements were extending support to tarnish the farmers' protests and to give it a Khalistani angle, even though it wasn't. It was a genuine farmer-led movement. They ruined the genuine farmer-led movement. So Amritpal Singh started tweeting about it, started posting on Facebook especially, and he started making videos linking the protests with Khalistani ideology. And he became widely popular. His videos went viral. He became a social media star, influencer overnight. And obviously, this was taken note by Pakistan. And according to Indian intelligence agencies, after the farmers' protests, sometime after the farmers' protests, the ISI established contact with Amritpal Singh by taking the help of other Khalistani terrorists, especially the Khalistan Tiger Force, a guy known as Avtar Singh Kanda and others who were hiding in UK back then. With their help, they got in touch with Amritpal Singh and they started grooming Amritpal Singh to become the leader of this group, Waris Punjab Day. So even before India could realize what was happening, within months, Amritpal Singh had become a popular leader promoting radical ideas, and he declared himself as the leader of Waris Punjab Day. He became the self-appointed leader after Deep Sidhu's killing. This is what leads India to conclude that Deep Sidhu was mostly assassinated because of gang rivalry, and maybe there was an intelligence operation involving Pakistan. Pakistan probably got him assassinated, maybe, again, it's speculation, by working with criminal gangs. So that if he is removed, Amritpal Singh, someone like him, could take over the organization. And this guy, Amritpal Singh, returned to India last year. He came back to India from Dubai. Until then, his presence was mainly on social media. He declared himself as the leader of Waris Punjab Day and came to Punjab and started leading the Khalistan cause again. He turned Waris Punjab Day into essentially the front of Khalistan movement. They held violent protests and rallies in Punjab. They attacked a police station. They demanded the release of some of their radical members who had been arrested by the Punjab police. All right, this happened earlier this year, in the end of 2020, exactly 1 year back, and in January, February 2023. All right, these are very recent developments. And right before this, we saw the rising of Khalistani flag in Punjab, even in Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. In many places, Khalistani flags have been raised in public places, in important traffic junctions, in circles, near public monuments. Right? Khalistani posters and flags have started coming up in Punjab, also in parts of Haryana and Himachal Pradesh. Now, this is what really worries India. So, this guy, Amritpal Singh, who was now being groomed to become the face of Khalistan movement, He came back to India, declared himself as the leader of Waris Punjab. They started leading rallies against the Indian state. Some of the rallies turned violent. When his members were arrested, they attacked the police station itself. Look at the audacity of the group, attacking a police station to release their members. This was the ultimate breakdown of law and order in Punjab. It was a failure of the Punjab police and also the central government because they had failed to anticipate this. Right? Amrit Pal Singh should have been cut long back. He should have been detained, arrested long back. But his activities went beyond control, and before India could act, before our intelligence agencies and Punjab police could act, it was already too late. He had become way too popular. The reason behind his popularity is because he's a great orator. He can speak very well. He can impress anyone, right? That is how he became a social media star. And what the strategy that they adopted was, they wanted to project Amritpal Singh as the new version of legendary terrorist Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. According to reports, this was the plan of ISI. The ISI wanted to project him as the new Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, who could mobilize all Khalistani elements, just like Bhindranwale had done with the Golden Temple. Remember how he had accumulated hundreds of Khalistani terrorists with large weapons in Golden Temple in 84, right? So Amritpal Singh was someone who could replicate that, right? As he could impress people, influence people easily, he could speak very well. He had been groomed by Pakistan and other Khalistani terror leaders in foreign countries. According to Indian intelligence agencies, he was taken to Georgia by ISI to get a cosmetic surgery done to make him look like Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Now look at the extent they have gone to. He started tying a turban. He started dressing exactly like Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. He replicated his look, basically. Because see, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale is actually a very worshipped figure in Punjab even today. In some of the rural areas and villages in Punjab, if you go to the rural pockets, there are certain places where Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale is actually worshipped. There are statues of him even today. So the idea was to bring back this godlike figure. And ISI played a direct role with Khalistani terror groups to groom Amritpal Singh, make him look like Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Indian intelligence has reports that he was taken to Georgia for a cosmetic surgery to make him look like Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. He would dress like him. So when he came to India, he started preaching that he's the new Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Immediately, he got a lot of fan following. And that is when we saw the escalation in these incidents. So once the police station was attacked, that was the final nail in the coffin for India. Following this, the government of India and the government of Punjab, they decided to target Waris Punjab Day. They decided to target Amritpal Singh. He had to be arrested. There was no other way. So a major operation was launched to nab Amritpal Singh. Is that clear? The Punjab police with central intelligence agencies who were keeping track of Amritpal Singh and his activities launched a nab operation to capture Amritpal Singh. But unfortunately, this operation went wrong. It was not handled well. This was another failure of the government. It was a major security lapse by the central government and also by the state police. This resulted in a public chase where Amritpal Singh escaped from the Punjab police, and this was caught live on media. Is that clear? So Amritpal Singh managed to escape. During this nab operation, internet was suspended across Punjab. For several days, internet was suspended because security agencies anticipated a retaliation and violence across the state. So internet had been suspended. And despite that, the operation went wrong. The Punjab police, they failed to apprehend Amritpal Singh. He managed to escape. He managed to run away. But many of his close associates, they were arrested. They were all taken out of Punjab and they were thrown into a jail in Assam. Right? They wanted to keep them away, as far away as possible from Punjab. So then the hunt began to nab Amritpal Singh. It's one of India's biggest manhunt. It went on for several days. Punjab police and intelligence agencies kept looking for him, but there was no trace of Amritpal Singh. After several days of running away from the forces, finally Amritpal Singh surrendered. He surrendered voluntarily. Is that clear? He surrendered, and right now Amritpal Singh has been arrested. He has been arrested, and even he is lodged in the same jail in Assam, where all his members are also arrested. So today, Waris Punjab Day has almost been wiped out by India. This group has almost been eliminated because most of the top members, including its leader Amritpal Singh, they are under arrest. They are facing terrorism charges. They will all be prosecuted. But when these operations took place in India earlier this year, when India was trying to nab Amritpal Singh and when internet was suspended and there was a lot of tension in Punjab, there was something else that happened abroad. Is that clear? In UK, in Australia, in US and Canada, we saw some very, very disturbing developments. As India was trying to capture Amritpal Singh and a major operation was launched and internet had been suspended, right? And prohibitory orders were in place in Punjab. This triggered a retaliation and a response from Khalistani elements, from Khalistani extremists amongst sections of the diaspora. This again shows the degree of coordination that they have, right? That is where India suspects a direct involvement of Pakistan's ISI again, right? So the arrest of Amritpal Singh triggered a response abroad, and several extremist groups in London, for example, they held a major rally. They protested in front of the Indian High Commission in London, right? The British authorities allowed the rally and the protest to take place. And the worst part was one individual who today is dead. He climbed the railings of the High Commission and brought down the Indian flag. This was a great disrespect to the nation, right? In diplomacy, every government is obligated to protect the diplomatic missions. It was a duty of the British government to protect the Indian High Commission and the Indian diplomats. They shouldn't have allowed the rally or the protest to take place in the first place. But since Western countries, they have their so-called liberal democracy, they allow freedom of speech and expression, right? They had allowed the rally to be held. But this turned violent. They started pelting stones. Few diplomats got hurt. And one individual climbed the railings, brought down an Indian flag as well. The Indian High Commission was under attack. The same thing happened in Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney, which today are the hotspots of Khalistan extremism. Indian consulates were attacked. Pro-Khalistan rallies were held. Flags and posters came up calling for free Khalistan. Hindu temples in Australia were defaced by Khalistani extremists. Now, these are very, very serious incidents because in Australia and even in New Zealand, there is a strong diaspora community, right? So when these pro-Khalistani extremists took out pro-Khalistan rallies, they were met by pro-India protesters. This led to clashes between the two groups. The pro-Khalistani extremists who were leading a rally, they clashed with pro-India students and others who are settled in Australia who are pro-India, which led to violence between these two groups. There have been incidents in New Zealand as well. There have been few minor incidents in New Zealand that highlights the attempt to start a new support base in these countries. Then in San Francisco, the Indian consulate has been attacked 2 times in the last few months. First, they pelted some stones. Second time, they tried setting fire to the Indian consulate. So these are very, very serious developments. In Canada, pro-Khalistan rallies, protests have been taking place very frequently, and Indian diplomats have been threatened as well. Right? Now imagine, these are the events happening in friendly countries. These are all friendly nations to India. So these governments have failed to tackle them. They have failed to prevent them. Australia, however, has assured India of full assistance. It has promised to fully cooperate with India to tackle the threat, because Australia is a very reliable, trusted partner, and India and Australia have committed to end any kind of support base that exists for Khalistan movement in Australia. From sharing intelligence to joint surveillance, India and Australia are working together to tackle the Khalistani threat in Australia and also in New Zealand. But the real concern is about the Canadian government. Justin Trudeau has always been creating problems for India, particularly with regard to the Khalistan movement. We have concerns with even US and even United Kingdom, because in the first place, UK should have protected the Indian High Commission. It shouldn't have allowed these rallies and protests. At least it should have ensured enough security. US as well, as a friendly country, should have acted before to protect the Indian consulate. So these are very serious matters that India has escalated at the highest level. A few years before, let me tell you what happened with Canada. Canadian PM Justin Trudeau was visiting India in 2018, and he was bringing an entire delegation, a business delegation. As part of his delegation, a Khalistani terrorist was included, Jaspal Atwal. Jaspal Atwal was a member of International Sikh Youth Federation, which is a designated terrorist organization under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. It's been involved in acts of terrorism in India and abroad. Back in 1986, Jaspal Atwal was involved in the assassination attempt of a Punjab state minister. Is that clear? The members of IS5, along with Jaspal Atwal, they had tried to assassinate a Punjab minister, and he was convicted in this case. Few others were arrested. They were punished in India, but Jaspal Atwal managed to escape. He escaped from India and he sought refuge in Canada, and he had been working under a false identity. He became a successful businessman in Canada. But in India, he's a convicted, wanted individual. Right? He's been convicted in a court of his involvement in this assassination attempt. So according to India, he's a convicted terrorist and we want him to be deported. But the Canadian PM was bringing him as part of his diplomatic delegation, because that would create challenges for India. Now India cannot arrest him because he would enjoy diplomatic immunity as part of the Prime Minister's delegation. So India protested against this. India said, don't bring Jaspal Atwal to India. But Trudeau included him in the list, went ahead with the visit, and this really angered India. It bothered India. Right? So India downgraded the visit itself. India didn't give much importance to this visit. No top leader met the Canadian PM. All the top meetings were cancelled. So this became quite embarrassing for the Canadian PM, right? Now, why does Canada do this? What's the reason behind it? Are they directly supporting Khalistan movement? Or what's the explanation here? See, this is about domestic electoral politics. Just like politics in India, every party, every political leader will be interested about their political vote base. In Canada, the Sikh votes are crucial given their large presence. They play a critical role in Canadian elections, right? And especially the party Trudeau belongs to has been closely linked with the Sikh community. There are many members of the Sikh community who have become top officials, ministers, cabinet ministers in the Canadian government. So they do have a lot of influence on Canadian parties and Canadian government. There are few Sikh political parties as well, which are part of the coalition that is in power with Justin Trudeau. So obviously there are political compulsions. So this is the reason why India has issues with Canada. So Canada is not directly supporting the movement. That's not the case. Don't get the wrong idea. It's not like Pakistan, where Pakistan is directly providing funds, weapons, and all the support needed. Canada is not doing that. That's for sure. Canada has only allowed them to operate. It has, in a way, nurtured them. It hasn't acted against them. See, recently in Canada, there was a rally held where they depicted the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. They publicly celebrated this, and Canadian authorities allowed this to happen. India took major offense to this, and we raised a diplomatic complaint. How could you allow this event? A former Indian Prime Minister being assassinated is being celebrated in Canada, right? Now, that is not how friendly countries behave. So that is where India started putting pressure on Canada. Our ties have taken a hit in the last few years. Canada even tried to repair the damage. It signed an agreement with India to jointly tackle terrorism, to counter terrorism, to share information with each other. But still, Canada has broken the agreement. We have seen in the last 1.5 to 2 years that Canadian authorities have not been cooperative. And there is also a suspicion that Canada is having some contact with the Khalistani outfits. If not directly supporting them and encouraging them, they are at least tolerating them in the name of free speech and expression. Since they are so-called liberal open democracies, they allow all kind of voices to raise their demands. They just look at Khalistani movement as a separatist movement, as a Sikh movement fighting for their rights. They look at Sikhs as just minority community of India. So they believe that the Sikhs in Canada have a right to raise their voice. This is fine as long as it is a protest, peaceful protest, as long as it is being done in a peaceful manner, in a legal manner. If this involves terror activities, radical separatist activities threatening India's integrity and sovereignty, attacks against Indian missions, threats to Indian diplomats, and if it involves an open call for violence against India, then that is not tolerable. That is not free speech. So despite India's many appeals, Canada has not acted. Right? Now, what happened after this? There have been some dramatic developments. In the last 2 years, 20 plus wanted terrorists have fallen dead under mysterious circumstances in Pakistan, in UK, in Canada, and in other countries. One by one, in Pakistan, many Lashkar terrorists, Jaish terrorists have been shot dead by unknown masked men. Several terrorists have been poisoned. Few Khalistani terrorists hiding in Pakistan have been shot dead. In UK, the guy who climbed the railings and pulled down the Indian flag from the Indian High Commission was dead in a British hospital. Then Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was the current leader of Khalistan Tiger Force, based out of Canada with a Canadian citizenship, was shot dead in a Canadian city. Right? So these series of mysterious deaths that have been happening has led to a conspiracy theory. A theory that India's RAW might have reactivated its covert operations of the 80s to neutralize these terrorists by carrying out targeted assassinations. See, there is a difference when this happens in Pakistan and when it happens in friendly countries like Canada, US, etc. Canada raised an allegation after the G20 summit that Indian agents were involved in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. This is illegal if proven. India has dismissed all these claims. There is no evidence as of now to link India with the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. See, please understand, as of now, this is a speculation. It's a conspiracy theory. We may not be involved at all in any of these killings. I know what has happened yesterday as well in Pakistan, right? It's not yesterday. In fact, it happened a couple of days ago. According to many credible reports, Dawood Ibrahim also has been hospitalized. And there's a lot of buzz on social media that he has been poisoned. May be true, may not be true, right? He's already old as well. He could be suffering from an illness. There have been many such reports that Dawood Ibrahim is dead. He has been hospitalized. We never know until we get something concrete. But it is true that, yes, many wanted terrorists have fallen dead, shot by unknown men, poisoned, etc. But without credible evidence, we can't point the fingers at India. This is just a conspiracy theory as of now. So Canada raised a serious allegation. In the parliament, in the Canadian parliament, the Prime Minister said that we have evidence to prove that Indian agents were involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So this triggered a massive diplomatic conflict. Both India and Canada targeted each other, downgraded their diplomatic relations. We have suspended the FTA talks. The free trade negotiations that were going on has been stopped. Visa services were stopped. The diplomatic strength has been reduced in both the countries. So our ties with Canada has taken a major hit, an unbelievable hit. Is that clear? So, on what basis did Canada make this allegation? That is the question. Reports have indicated that Canada based its allegation on an intelligence input coming from the Five Eyes Alliance. What is the Five Eyes Alliance? It's an intelligence alliance of 5 Western democracies. It includes the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. These 5 Western democracies have an intelligence gathering initiative called the Five Eyes Alliance, formed after the Second World War. They have a global network of facilities through which they can intercept any form of communication. They can intercept the whole internet. They can listen to every call, every conversation, every satellite communication. Any form of electronic communication can be intercepted by them. That is the tremendous capability they have built. So Canada said this input came from the Five Eyes Alliance. So all experts, media, they pointed fingers at US. Most likely the input would have come from the US, meaning US was spying on India. It was keeping watch on Indian officials. So without a basis, these allegations wouldn't have come, not in Canadian Parliament. See, speculative theories are different, but making a public open allegation, that too by the PM in the Parliament, and citing Five Eyes Alliance as the input, which gives the evidence linking Indian officials with the assassination, is a very, very serious allegation. Again, there may be truth to it or not. We are not in a position to verify that. But India's position is that we deny this. We have denied all these claims. We have said this is not our policy. We are not involved in assassinations. We never do that. Officially, we don't have such covert programs going on. India has denied those allegations and we have asked for evidence. And Canada, of course, has not shared any evidence. Because evidence generated through intelligence gathering will not be shared with other countries. That will compromise their operations. So our ties with Canada took a major hit a few months ago. Then came another explosive story that gives the backstory to this development. We got to know that in June, the US has foiled an assassination attempt. The US intelligence agencies had foiled an assassination attempt targeting Gurpantwan Singh Panoon, the leader of Sikhs for Justice. Now, this guy has been a notorious irritant for India. Recently, he threatened the Cricket World Cup. He issued a threat to the Indian Parliament. He has been instigating the Khalistan movement from several months. So, of course, India keeps a watch on them. We carry out surveillance. We generate intelligence on them, which is very valid. Any country would do that. But planning the assassination of these terrorists on foreign soil, that too in a friendly country, becomes a different matter altogether. According to reports, a case has been filed in a US court. This is what gives it credibility. If it was just hearsay, if it was just conspiracy theories, it wouldn't have any basis. But the fact that a case has been filed, indictment has been started in a US court, adds weightage to this case. According to this allegation, a criminal by the name Nikhil Gupta, he's an organized criminal involved in drug trafficking, arms trafficking, etc. He's an Indian citizen. He was working from Croatia in Europe. Sorry, he was working from Czech Republic, not Croatia. Please make a correction. He was working in Czech Republic in the UK. And apparently, he was in touch with an Indian intelligence officer. He has just been referred to as CC1 in the court documents. The US, which unraveled this plot allegedly, right, has identified this Indian intelligence agent and they have not revealed his name. According to US court papers, he is an Indian agent working for RAW who was on deputation from the CRPF. This is what the US court documents are indicating. He's a CRPF officer deputed with RAW. He has just been named as CC1 in the court filings. And apparently, he was giving a contract killing to Nikhil Gupta. Nikhil Gupta, who is a transnational criminal involved in drugs and arms trafficking. So Nikhil Gupta allegedly contacted an assassin in the US. He promised the money that will be paid if he executes Gurpantwan Singh Panu. Now, don't forget, he's an American-Canadian citizen. He has a dual citizenship based out of US. So, obviously, US-Canada will take the matter very seriously. Same with Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was a Canadian citizen, right? Now, the problem here was the assassin who was being hired by Nikhil Gupta was actually an American agent, a DEA agent, the Drug Enforcement Authority's agent. He was not a real assassin. The plot would have not really happened. It was a setup by US intelligence to trap the Indian operation, if the operation was going on again, because we are denying it, right? If it was indeed an Indian operation involving RAW, if we were hiring an organized criminal to carry out the assassination, right? then it was being disrupted by US intelligence agencies. They knew about this from before. They were tracking it, and they had brought Nikhil Gupta into contact with their own agent. Nikhil Gupta was deceived to think he was an assassin, but he was not. He was an American agent. So, with solid evidence, the US has apparently unraveled this plot. This is backed up with technical intelligence as well, obtained through interception of emails, telephone calls, and mobile communication. That clearly shows the Five Eyes Alliance was obviously spying on Indian officials. Right? So now Nikhil Gupta has been arrested in the Czech Republic and he is being deported to the US. He will be prosecuted. He is likely to go to jail in the US. Right? Now, the US authorities who unraveled this plot went public when they filed the case, and this predates the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So that shows where the warning came for Canada. Obviously, it was US which had warned Canada that US knew about these operations going on, and they were disrupting them proactively to not allow these illegal operations on their soil. So this is a very complex, controversial matter. Right? UPSC is unlikely to question you on this. But again, it's always good to know. As a UPSC aspirant, given how important the topic is, Khalistan movement, it's a very important topic. You have to be aware of this. See, whether we are involved or not, we can't say that. I can't tell you that. You can't tell me that. No one can tell us that. Even if we are, government will never acknowledge it. We will keep denying it. That is the world of covert operations. It's plausible deniability. We will keep denying our involvement. There could also be a possibility where we are not at all involved in any of these deaths that have happened. The series of deaths in Pakistan, the killings in Canada, the attempted plot in US, we may not have been involved. There could be someone else. Remember, I told you there are organized criminal gangs fighting and targeting each other. It could be gang rivalry without any Indian involvement. Some theories suggest that RAW is working with these criminal gangs, using them to target each other, similar to how we had set up Chota Rajan against Dawood Ibrahim back in the days of 90s, right, when the underworld of Bombay had turned to terrorism. A split had come up between Dawood gang and the Chota Rajan gang. If Dawood joined Pakistan and took ISI support to wage terrorism against India, Chota Rajan allegedly worked for RAW to assassinate members of Dawood Ibrahim. Essentially, RAW and IB were using Chota Rajan's gang, and through their criminal members, they were hitting Pakistani targets, hitting Dawood Ibrahim's gang. This is according to several verifiable accounts. So some experts are indicating that we might be repeating this. We may not be doing it directly, but we are using criminal gangs like Lawrence Bishnoi gang, for example. Lawrence Bishnoi has been known to be close to Indian authorities. Or else, how could he operate from jail? How could he run his criminal network by being in jail? Correct? There are other criminals. Take Nikhil Gupta, for example. Nikhil Gupta, the cases against him were dropped. He had many cases in Gujarat and Rajasthan, which were dropped by the state police. For what reason? So there might be some Indian involvement. Maybe we're not doing it directly. We are doing it indirectly through a proxy. Just like Pakistan uses proxies, it uses terror groups. We might be using organized criminal groups to hit our targets. But we may not be involved at all. Even that is possible. So don't assume anything. All right? Of course, there are patterns. There are some credible inputs coming. What Canada, US have revealed, that does provide a lot of credible evidence to link this with India. But again, it's not proven, it's not confirmed. So understand this, keep track of this, but don't make assumptions. Don't assume that RAW is behind all these killings, right? And again, don't be foolish enough to think that we are not. It could be, or it could be not. So this is an answer we'll find only in the future. Maybe 30, 40 years later, we'll get to know. But until then, definitely this will remain a mystery, a conspiracy theory. All right. So from an examination point of view, whatever I discussed here regarding these covert operations, it will not be relevant for the exam. UPSC will not ask about this. It might ask about the impact of Khalistan movement on India's ties with friendly countries like Canada and US. That is a valid question. Is that clear? So, on this note, I would like to complete my detailed discussion of the Khalistan movement. See, this topic is a big topic. It deserved more attention from us because of all the recent developments that have happened. Before, believe it or not, like 2, 3 years back, I would complete this topic in 1, 1.5 hours maximum. Now I think we have taken 2.5 to 3 hours maybe, because that is how many developments have happened, and we have to cover everything. We can't leave any topic, right? I hope you guys have understood everything. Now let us take a short break. Let's take a 15 minutes break. It's almost 7:52. Let's come back at 8:07. All right, we'll come back in 15 minutes and we'll start with the next topic: insurgency and terrorism in Kashmir. I'll take up your questions and then we'll start the next topic. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the session. First, let me take all your questions regarding the Khalistan movement, and then we'll start with the next topic. Vedashri is asking, any specific reason why Pakistan wants to revive the Khalistan movement now? I think I explained this because Pakistan is under tremendous international pressure to not use Lashkar, Jaish, and other terror groups to target Indian cities and Indian civilian population. This is after the Mumbai attacks, after the 26/11 attacks. And as you know, Pakistan is going through an internal crisis, a major economic crisis. There are a lot of internal divisions. There is another terror group called TTP, which has started targeting Pakistani state itself. So, as a state, Pakistan has also weakened. So, it wants new ways to target India. It wants new strategies to target India. As it can no longer carry out the attacks like before, where it could use Lashkar, Jaish, and other groups to hit Indian cities easily. Now that is not possible anymore, right? It has shifted to this new approach where it is using the terror groups to target military sites, military installations, because that will not attract the same kind of global pressure. And it has also tried to revive the Khalistan movement. So these are the reasons that explain why Pakistan wants to revive the movement now. And again, now when I say now, it's not 2023. This has been happening from 2010, at least from last 13 years. Mega is asking, but now the Sikh diaspora in Western countries, especially the youth, some of them follow the ideology of Khalistan movement, even if not completely involved in criminal activities. And this is what is fueling them. Then what should be the way forward? See, dealing with the support base that exists abroad will remain a challenge for India. So what can we do? One, we need cooperation from these countries. The good thing is that they are friendly governments today, unlike the differences we had in 1980s, 1990s. Today, these are good friends of India. So we have to rely on our diplomatic partnership and ensure that these countries cooperate with us. That is one. Second, we have to work more closely with the Sikh community abroad. The Indian government, the foreign ministry especially, has to develop better contacts with the community leaders, the elders in the Sikh community at Gurudwaras, to ensure that the youth are not misled on the wrong path. Right? So all these measures are needed, along with better surveillance to keep a check on these extremists. Mohan Raj has a similar question, why Pakistan is not attacking major cities of India since 26/11. It's because there is a lot of international pressure on Pakistan. Pakistan was grey listed by FATF for its failure to prosecute terrorists and to impose the UN sanctions. So another major attack on India, which is traced back to Pakistan, will further bring that pressure from UN, from FATF, and from major countries like US. That is the primary reason why Pakistan has largely stayed away from launching major attacks on Indian cities. Harshika is asking, why does Pakistan want to revive the Khalistan movement given that Khalistanis consider Pakistani Punjab also a part of so-called Khalistan? Harshika has a very good point. See, the Khalistan idea includes not just the Indian side of Punjab, it will include the Pakistani side of Punjab as well. Then why is Pakistan supporting the movement? Wouldn't this be a threat to Pakistan's integrity and sovereignty as well? If eventually Khalistan were to be created, hypothetically, right? It's not just India, even Pakistan will suffer, right? That is the point Harshika is also raising. But let me tell you why this is not a threat to Pakistan. In the Pakistani side of Punjab, the presence of the Sikh community has diminished massively. During the partition and the communal violence that followed, most of the Sikh families were driven out from Pakistan into India. The Sikhs who are present in Pakistan, they are a minuscule number. They are a very, very small minority. So Pakistani Punjab is dominated by Punjabi Muslims, who are the most dominant class in the Pakistani society. So Khalistani movement can never take root in Pakistan, Punjab. And also, since Pakistan controls most of the groups, it has a degree of leverage on them. It can always control the movement to ensure it poses a threat only to India and not to Pakistan. Is that clear? First and foremost, there is no support base. You don't have a strong Sikh community to back this movement in Pakistan. It's only on the Indian side. And even today in India, Khalistan movement, trust me, it's not a big threat. Majority of the Sikhs, 99% of them, they don't support this movement. They don't support this ideology anymore. They are completely in favor of India. It's a small percentage of these radicalized members who are trying to instigate this. Whatever Amritpal Singh tried, whatever Waris Punjab they did, we managed to curtail them immediately. The challenge right now is the diaspora, the extremist elements abroad who are operating quite freely, and that is a concern for us. More than the domestic threat, it's the foreign threat. Even the foreign threat will not directly challenge our integrity and sovereignty. It's not that Punjab will break away from India. That is impossible. But the concern here is that if these extremists, if they keep raising the voice in foreign soil, if they keep internationalizing the Punjab issue, and if they keep targeting Indian missions, Indian diplomats, that will cause embarrassment to India. There is also theory that US and Western countries might be slightly encouraging these extremists, at least tolerating them, because even they want some leverage on India. Because, see, with regard to Russia Ukraine war, India has not criticized Russia. We haven't joined Western countries in following their sanctions against Russia. Obviously, US is not happy with it. European countries are not happy with India. They've said they're not happy with India's position on Russia. They may be looking for a leverage which they can use to put pressure on India so that India also takes a stand against Russia. This is the theory of some strategic experts. So, by allowing Khalistani activities on their soil to a limited extent, they could get some leverage which they can use to pressurize India. So, that might be a possibility, right? So, the real threat right now is with these extremists operating abroad. Within India, the threat is very limited. There is no popular support. Even amongst the diaspora, majority of them are moderate, peaceful. They are pro-India. But some of these extremists, these radical extremists, they are the ones creating the challenge. So India is trying its best to tackle this both at the domestic front and also at the external front. Anshu is asking impact of Khalistan movement on India's sites. That's what we covered throughout the chapter, right? The impact would be maybe a rise in terror attacks, a direct security challenge which threatens our integrity and sovereignty. Maybe if the movement escalates further, then the further flow of drugs and weapons from Pakistan could further create a security crisis. So that is something which concerns India. Because recently, Pakistan has started using drones to easily smuggle weapons, money, and drugs into India. These small drones that are available, Chinese built drones, which are commercially available, they can easily carry a few kilograms of drugs or weapons or money and drop it on the Indian side. So today, infiltration has become easier thanks to drone technology. So every year, hundreds of drones are sneaking across the border. BSF shoots down many of them. So that is one more concern, the border security concerns, the infiltration of drugs, weapons, etc. Next, of course, is the foreign angle, the constant international attention, the pressure on India. So these are the impacts of the Khalistan movement. Any other question? Sham is asking, sir, please tell me the relation between organized crime, terrorism, and drugs. See, I've been explaining this in every class. Let me repeat it once again. Organized crime is closely linked with terrorism. I can give you many examples to prove this. Look at how Dawood Ibrahim played a direct role in enabling Pakistan's terrorism against India. Dawood Ibrahim was an organized criminal, correct? He was the don of the Bombay underworld, involved in drug smuggling, arms smuggling, gold smuggling, etc. So after he took shelter in Pakistan, he aligned with the ISI. And for ISI's protection, He used his criminal infrastructure to assist terrorist activities in India. The 93 Bombay blasts and the many other attacks that have happened in 90s and early 2000, they've been enabled by Dawood Ibrahim's criminal network. How? The terrorist groups which want to smuggle terrorists, weapons, and drugs into India, they will take the help of criminal gangs. So you can see that direct link between criminal organizations and terrorist organizations. And also, as we discussed before, drugs is an easy way to raise funds for their operations. Naxals, as I told you, they grow drugs in the forested areas. They encourage the farmers to grow opium, which they smuggle and traffic. That brings a lot of money to fund their operations. Northeast insurgents, they rely on drug smuggling, drug trafficking. They procure drugs from Myanmar. Sometimes it is locally grown, and they smuggle and traffic these drugs to raise funds for their activities. They also use the drugs to indoctrinate the youth. They get the youth addicted to drugs, and it makes them easier for radicalization. So, this is how organized crime and terrorism is directly connected. Okay, last question. Saurav is asking, Sir, can you provide some expected questions from this Khalistan topic for the upcoming years? You can expect a number of questions from here. For example, there could be a question on the history of Khalistan movement. UPSC might ask you to examine the root causes of Khalistan movement, or what happened in the 80s and 90s. What threat did Khalistan movement pose in the 80s? How did India tackle the threat? What was India's response? Or there could be a question on the recent revival of the movement. UPSC might ask, we are witnessing an organized attempt to revive the dormant Khalistan movement. What factors could be behind it? UPSC might ask that the revival of Khalistan movement has affected our ties with friendly Western countries, with US and Canada. So how do we deal with it? Or what is the impact of Khalistan movement on India's ties with friendly countries? So all such questions can be anticipated. Is that clear? Maybe a question on the connection of Khalistan movement with organized crime, Pakistani state support to Khalistan movement, the connection of Khalistan movement with the Afghan conflict. All these core topics can be picked up for a mains question. Understood? So let's move on with the next topic. Let's start with the next discussion. Let's look at Jammu and Kashmir. We will talk about the separatist movement in Kashmir, the insurgency, the terrorism that we have witnessed, that we continue to witness in J&K. It's another important topic as it again involves cross-border terrorism and state-sponsored terrorism. Because obviously, there is a direct role played by Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir. It is Pakistan which has fueled, triggered the separatist movement. It continues to back the insurgent groups and the terrorist groups as part of its covert war against India. So let's understand, how did this movement begin? What is its origin? What were the root causes? When did separatism start in J&K? When did the militancy start? What is the threat it has posed and what is the current status? You have to understand all these points. See, Jammu and Kashmir, as you know, has been a source of dispute between India and Pakistan since 1947. I'll give you a brief background. I'll not go into the international relations part of it, because that discussion regarding Kashmir's, J&K's accession to the Indian Union, that is a discussion for IR, where we cover the topic under international relations. Here I'll just give you a brief background and then talk about what happened in 1980s that gave birth to militancy in J&K. So please remember, the violence in Jammu and Kashmir began in 1987. So it means for 4 decades, for 40 years, J&K did not have any local separatist movement. There was no insurgency, no terrorism in J&K. It was largely peaceful, apart from the threat posed by Pakistan. Understood? In 1947, when India, Pakistan became independent, the two new dominions were born. The princely states had the choice. According to the Indian Independence Act passed by the British, two independent dominions were created, the Indian Dominion and Pakistan Dominion. Princely states, they had the choice, they had the freedom to either join India or join Pakistan or remain independent. This choice was left to the ruler. The legitimate ruler of the princely state will decide, not the people. This is according to the Indian Independence Act. So in Jammu and Kashmir, who was the ruler when India gained independence? It was Raja Hari Singh from the Dogra dynasty who ruled over J&K. Raja Hari Singh initially opted for independence. He didn't want to join Pakistan because he knew that Pakistan is becoming a theological state, a radical extremist state promoting radical religion, meaning religious minorities will be targeted. And in Hari Singh's kingdom, there were Hindus, there were Buddhists, there were Muslims, right? It was a very diverse society in J&K. So if such a princely state were to join Pakistan, there would be no future for J&K. And moreover, the Raja will lose his authority. The monarchy will come to an end. The same concern prevented Raja Hari Singh from joining India as well. Even though India was a secular country where everyone will be treated equally, Raja Hari Singh didn't want to give up his authority, his monarchy. It was not just Raja Hari Singh. There were many other monarchs who were hesitant to join India as well. So technically, for a few months, Jammu and Kashmir was an independent state, neither a part of India nor a part of Pakistan. Then Pakistan realized the opportunity. It kept its eyes on J&K. It saw that Kashmir is Muslim dominated. It saw that J&K has plenty of resources. And more importantly, it has a strategic location. It connects India with China and Central Asia. It's part of the ancient Silk Route, the ancient trading route. So driven by these objectives, Pakistan made an illegal attempt to capture J&K. It carried out an invasion and occupied many parts of Jammu and Kashmir. So obviously Raja Hari Singh couldn't fight back against the Pakistani attack. So under these difficult circumstances, Raja Hari Singh asked India for help, asked India's assistance. So the then Indian leaders, Prime Minister Nehru and Home Minister Sardar Patel, they placed a condition. See, we will come to your assistance, we will help you, but J&K should join India. Without J&K being a part of India, why should India defend J&K? That was the argument. So with no options left, Raja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession, thus formally merging J&K into the Indian Union. So that is why we say that the whole state of J&K belongs to India. That is correct. That is technically correct, legally correct. Because according to Indian Independence Act, the ruler of J&K could decide which country to join. First, he had opted for independence, but now he was signing the instrument of accession, surrendering his sovereignty to the Indian Union. The moment the instrument of accession was signed, the whole princely state of J&K became an integral part of the Indian Union, which means Pakistan was now in illegal occupation of these territories. So immediately India went to war. India deployed its troops, fought against Pakistan, the first India-Pakistan war. We pushed back Pakistan as well. Many captured areas were retaken by the Indian army. Then finally, a ceasefire was called. We took the matter to the United Nations. So that is a different matter altogether. But since then, since the ceasefire was established, the dispute has remained. Pakistan continues to occupy few areas which we refer to as POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, with rest of J&K being under Indian control. So this dispute has persisted. After 1947, even after the ceasefire was called, Pakistan has made many more attempts to capture J&K. In 1965, it made a second attempt. It went to war with India to capture J&K again, but was again defeated by India. So From 1947 till 1980s, during these 4 decades, Pakistan kept making an attempt to capture J&K from India. It kept meddling in Jammu and Kashmir, right? But this was always an external problem. It was a problem with the external enemy, that is Pakistan. It was an India Pakistan issue. But internally, Jammu and Kashmir remained stable for a good 4 decades. From 1947 to 1987. For 40 years, J&K was largely peaceful and stable internally. So the people of Jammu and Kashmir, they had accepted India's sovereignty. They had merged with the Indian Union. They were just like any other Indian citizen. They were even given a special status under Article 370. This was part of the merger agreement, the accession agreement. Raja Hari Singh wanted a commitment, a promise, a constitutional guarantee that the rights of people of J&K will be protected. Because only few subjects were surrendered to India in the instrument of accession. Subjects like defense, communication, security, only these subjects were assigned to the government of India and the Parliament of India. In rest of the matters, with regard to other matters of administration, governance, like land, government schemes, reservation, etc., in all these areas, J&K wanted to retain its autonomy. So that is why it asked for a special status and it was given under Article 370 as a temporary provision. Similar special status has been given to other regions in Northeast India as well. In Nagaland, in Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, there are some special provisions that apply, especially in the tribal areas and in the autonomous district councils. A certain degree of autonomy is present in Northeast India, where even the parliament and the state government can't exercise full jurisdiction in all the matters. But the difference in J&K was, under Article 370, J&K got a separate constitution, a separate flag. The J&K government and the legislature, they would have a lot of autonomy in all the other aspects of administration and governance. Meaning laws made by the parliament will not automatically apply to J&K unless approved by the J&K legislature, right? Except for few areas like defense, security, communication, external affairs, etc. Other subjects will not apply. J&K will retain that autonomy. To protect the welfare of the residents of J&K, the permanent residents of J&K, Article 35A was added. This would give special privileges to the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. This was to protect the land of J&K, as J&K had joined India under very difficult circumstances, to ensure that outsiders will not come and purchase land, to protect the land and also to protect other privileges. Some rights were given only to the permanent residents of J&K. Even in tribal areas, for example, right? Outsiders can't purchase land. On similar lines, a special status was given here. So people of J&K were anticipating that by joining India, the region will grow, the region will thrive, the region will develop, their standard of living will improve, welfare will come to them. But what happened was, as India was preoccupied with Pakistan and the threats it was creating for India, inevitably, India got obsessed with security. This was not India's fault entirely. As a result, the development of Jammu and Kashmir got compromised. Is that clear? As Pakistan was a constant external threat, it had fought 2 wars with India over the Kashmir dispute. It was looking for every opportunity to meddle and interfere in J&K. So because of the constant external challenge, India was forced to prioritize security interests and defense of the nation. So India ended up militarizing Jammu and Kashmir. We deployed thousands of troops. We placed a lot of restrictions on fundamental rights. Because when a region becomes militarized, obviously basic rights will get curbed. Right to free speech and expression was curbed, right to movement, right to assembly. These basic rights, which were freely available in the rest of India, were limited for the residents of J&K. Along with that, the development of the region got compromised. The adequate development did not happen. Correct? And more importantly, the people of J&K felt that their political rights were not being upheld. Because as the Indian government was focused more on security and protecting J&K from Pakistan, there was an allegation that the central government relied heavily on one party, the National Conference, and one political family, the Abdullah family, to maintain stability and to ensure that J&K remains a part of India's sovereignty. Basically, the allegation was that the Indian government was encouraging dynastic politics in J&K for the sake of protecting J&K. Now, think about this from the perspective of people of Jammu and Kashmir. Don't have any biases, don't build any assumptions. For a second, stand yourself, put yourself in the shoes of a citizen from Jammu and Kashmir. They were hoping the region will develop just like rest of the country. Their rights, their well-being will be protected. Their political rights will be upheld. But in their view, in their perception, they're seeing that the government of India is only militarizing the region and restricting rights. So people of J&K assume that India is only interested in the land, in the territory of J&K, not the people of J&K. Assumption started building up that government of India doesn't care about the welfare of J&K, not about the people's welfare, but about the territorial control. So this perception that the government was relying on just one party and one family to retain that control gave rise to a negative sentiment. Is that clear? Sheikh Abdullah, who was the prime minister of J&K at one point in 1947, later he became the chief minister as well. He played a critical role in the accession of J&K into the Indian Union. Sheikh Abdullah and National Conference played a very important role in keeping J&K firmly in the Indian Union. But over a period of time, this became dynastic politics. Later, his son Farooq Abdullah became the leader. Now, Omar Abdullah, he became the leader as well. So, whenever dynastic politics flourishes, it could lead to corruption. It could lead to poor governance, maladministration. This became the biggest complaint of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially the youth. Their education had been ruined because of the security situation. They didn't have job opportunities. And they saw that a corrupt state government would continue winning elections after elections. And it had the support of the central government. This was the perception that got built in J&K by 1980s. So there were a lot of sentiments against the National Conference, against the Abdullah family. People of J&K wanted a change. They wanted a change in government. Because they always saw that either National Conference is in power or there is president's rule or governor's rule, where center and parliament directly administered the region. So they realized that their political rights, their political choices were being curbed. So this led to the rise of certain anti-India sentiments, especially amongst the youth of Jammu and Kashmir. Is that clear? So these sentiments were prevalent in the 1980s. Then state elections were scheduled to be held in 1987. During these elections, there was a lot of anti-incumbency against the National Conference. It was widely believed that National Conference will lose the election and other parties like PDP or someone else will form the next government. So basically, people wanted to remove this government. They wanted a change. They wanted a new government, new leaders to drive the development of the state. And of course, some of the youth were now taking the path of radicalization as well, because they started believing that J&K had a better future if it was independent. Because see, when Raja Hari Singh signed the instrument of accession, the people were never consulted. One monarch decided that J&K will merge with India, the two under very challenging, difficult, forceful circumstances. So people of J&K were never consulted. So there were some sections who are now cultivating separatist thoughts, that why should we be a part of India? Why shouldn't we be independent? We were never consulted whether should we join Pakistan or India. We were never part of any of these discussions. So some of the members of the radical sections, they started cultivating separatist tendencies. Is that clear? So please understand the political and the socio-economic factors that prevailed here. So at this critical point, when elections were scheduled to be held, it was widely believed that National Conference will lose the election. But during the elections, a rumor broke out. A rumor spread that Government of India was manipulating the election to favor the National Conference again. See, this remains a rumor till date. It's never been proven. So we can't comment whether it is true or not, whether India manipulated the election or not. But the rumor had a big impact. There was widespread rumors and people started believing this, that India was manipulating the elections to ensure that this party wins again. So when these rumors spread, this became the trigger, the immediate trigger for the separatist elements the radicalized sections who had taken shape by 1980s, and more importantly, the frustrated youth. So this was the combination that triggered the violent armed movement in J&K. This is where we witnessed the breakout of an armed separatist insurgency against India. In 1987 to 1989, during these two crucial years, we saw the formation of several armed separatist groups declaring a separatist insurgent war against the Indian state. We saw the start of militancy in Jammu and Kashmir following these rumors that the elections were being rigged by the Indian state. Initially, when the movement started, it was just another political separatist movement. Just like we have seen separatist movements in Northeast India by various rebel groups. On similar lines, some radicalized sections of J&K were looking to fight for independence. Their goal was to liberate J&K from India. Now, this was essentially a political problem. This is something we could have dealt with. If it was just this, India could have dealt with the challenge, we could have managed it, maybe we could have resolved it over a period of time. So the armed violence that began, of course, created a security challenge for India. It did pose a threat. But what really escalated the violence and turned this into terrorism was the involvement of Pakistan. Pakistan, which was waiting for such an opportunity in Kashmir, immediately jumped on the situation. It was waiting for such anti-India sentiments to take root, for a local separatist movement to begin. The moment it started, the moment these tendencies were building up, Pakistan latched onto it. The Pakistani army, the ISI, unleashed a major covert campaign to provide direct support to these separatist groups and insurgents. Please remember, initially, these were local groups comprising of Indian citizens, comprising of Kashmiri youth. This was a political problem essentially which we could have dealt with. Is that clear? But then Pakistan began its covert campaign against India. It directly linked the Afghan conflict with Kashmir, just like it had linked the Afghan conflict with Khalistan movement. By 1989, Afghan Mujahideen had defeated the Soviet forces in Afghanistan and Soviet forces were retreating. So now the Afghan Mujahideen fighters were free, and some of the Mujahideen fighters who were Afghan and Pakistani terrorists, they were brought and infiltrated into Kashmir. Is that clear? A foreign angle was introduced, more radical terrorists influenced by religious fundamentalism, influenced by Wahhabist Salafist ideology. They were introduced into the Kashmir theater by Pakistan. So India saw the infiltration of Afghan and Pakistani terrorists who were part of the Afghan Mujahideen. They were infiltrating across line of control, entering Kashmir and starting to carry out attacks against India. Parallelly, Pakistan gave shelter to all these separatist forces in Kashmir. As India targeted these separatist groups and the armed insurgent groups that had taken root, right? They were under pressure. They ran away from India. They took shelter in POK, in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And Pakistan conveniently created a safe haven for them. It gave them a base from where they could operate across the LOC, gave them all the support, gave them funds, training, weapons, and helped them in their infiltration across the LOC back into India to target the Indian state, to hit Indian forces, Indian civilians. So this is how the cycle of violence began. The large-scale militancy had started, and Pakistan went on to create dedicated anti-India terror groups for the so-called Kashmir cause. In the name of liberating Kashmir from India, Pakistan created several Kashmir-specific, Kashmir-centric terrorist organizations like Hizbul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Al-Badr, and many others. Later, Harkatul Mujahideen was formed. Then in 99-2000, Jaish-e-Mohammed was formed. All these terrorist outfits, all these Kashmir-centric groups, they're all based out of Pakistan. They get direct support from the ISI and the Pakistani army. They enjoy a safe sanctuary, a terror sanctuary in Pakistan. They not just get funds and training, they get weapons, they get complete support to target India. And these outfits, they would primarily focus on Kashmir with the goal of liberating Kashmir from India. So these groups, initially they comprised Pakistani Afghan terrorists, but later, as more Kashmiri youth got indoctrinated and radicalized, local Kashmiri terrorists also started joining these organizations. In fact, if you look at groups like Hizbul Mujahideen and its founder, Syed Salahuddin, he was a separatist element at one point, leading a political separatist movement against India. But he took shelter in Pakistan and with Pakistani support started a fundamentalist movement, a radical terrorist movement by establishing Hizbul Mujahideen. So several Kashmiri terrorists, Kashmiri youth who got radicalized, indoctrinated, also joined these organizations along with Pakistani Afghan terrorists. And it was Pakistan which had brought them together. So, with the introduction of religious fundamentalism, Pakistan added a communal angle to this conflict. It brought radical religion into the equation, and it used the terror groups to target religious minorities in Kashmir. This is another tragic event in India's history. The minorities in Kashmir were the Kashmiri Pandits, who are essentially Hindu Brahmins. For centuries, Kashmiri Pandits had lived in communal harmony with the Kashmiri Muslims. There was no enmity between them. They were all friends and family to each other. Because see, Kashmir historically has been a progressive, modern, liberal region. It has been part of the ancient trading route connecting India with Central Asia. It's been a hub of intellectuals, a hub of art and culture. Such a progressive region always had communal harmony where the Pandits had lived with Muslims for centuries together. This communal harmony was disturbed and broken by the Pakistani state. This was Pakistan's biggest success in its covert war against India. The communalization of the Kashmir conflict is what created a much bigger Hindu Muslim divide in the country. So, as Kashmiri Pandits were targeted, the Kashmir issue itself was perceived as a Hindu Muslim issue from here onwards. The Kashmir issue was never a Hindu Muslim issue. It was about people of J&K, some of them trying to assert their rights, taking the wrong path of violence to achieve those goals. So, such a political separatist movement, such an armed insurgency could have been tackled by India quite easily. But it was Pakistan's involvement and the introduction of religious fundamentalism with state support and the usage of these radical elements to target religious minorities which added the complexity into this equation. The religious angle came in. Across the country, across India, the issue became a Hindu-Muslim issue. Even today, trust me, go anywhere in India, talk to people about Kashmir issue. Talk to them about Naxal issue and let's say even Khalistan issue or Northeast insurgency. People may not know much about other issues, but everybody will have an opinion on the Kashmir issue. That's because this issue has reverberated across the country. It has had a nationwide impact. The reason is because it appeared as if radical Muslims were targeting Hindu minorities, right? But who was behind it? It was Pakistan. It was a geopolitical game. Religion has nothing to do with it. Religion was being deliberately, carefully being misused to add that communal angle to make this a Hindu-Muslim issue so that it could have a countrywide impact. The Kashmir issue will end up polarizing the nation on religious lines. So today, people pay more attention to Kashmir issue because there is an added communal color to it. People look at it from a communal lens. They look at it as a Hindu-Muslim issue. And this is Pakistan's biggest success in its covert war. As it had sworn to bleed India through 1,000 cuts, this was the biggest cut it delivered. By communalizing the Kashmir issue, it turned this into a wider communal dispute, leading to larger communalization of the Indian subcontinent. So every time you look at Kashmir issue as a Hindu-Muslim issue, please remember you're contributing to Pakistan's covert war. It has weakened the Indian society. Is that clear? So the Kashmiri Pandits did suffer. There were targeted attacks against them. A few Pandits were killed. Open threats were issued for the Pandits to leave. And eventually they became IDPs. They became internally displaced people. Right? But there are other propaganda stories which tell you that a genocide was committed, millions were killed. That is complete lies, not rooted in facts. There is a big difference between targeted persecution and a genocide. Genocide is where millions of people are slaughtered, that too with state support, if the government is supporting them. There was no government support here. Indian government was not encouraging these terrorists. So it is completely wrong to call it a genocide or as a mass extermination. The correct word here would be ethnic cleansing. An entire ethnic group was cleansed from J&K. That is a correct term. Few Pandits were targeted. Few Pandits were killed. Yes. Open threats were issued for Pandits to leave. And the government failed to prevent this. The coalition government, that was the government of India then, because J&K was under governor's rule. The coalition government, right, which included many coalition partners, they failed to act and protect the Kashmiri Pandits and the harmony of the Kashmiri society. So, Kashmiri society, the harmony was ruptured with this involvement of Pakistan, and as a result, the Pandits were displaced. They had to leave their property, their belongings, move out, and settle in other parts of India. Many Pandits have left India as well. They have settled in other countries. Some are in Delhi, some are in Punjab, right? Some have moved to Jammu. So very few Pandits remain here in Kashmir. So when this happened, it led to deeper divisions on religious lines. And throughout 1990s, there was large escalation in violence. There was a massive escalation in violence. Terrorism increased due to direct cross-border support. Not just in the late 80s, but even throughout 1990s. So basically from 1987 all the way till 2003. These were the 16 brutal years in J&K, the most dangerous years in Jammu and Kashmir. This was the peak of militancy and terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Is that clear? So there would be numerous attacks against Indian Army and Indian forces, anything representing the Indian state, right? And even against civilians as well. So as terrorism became the biggest threat for India, India countered the threat by imposing AFSPA. By 1989, India, of course, knew the external angle, the Pakistani involvement. This was no ordinary separatist movement. It was clearly turning into a terrorist movement with cross-border support, with weapons funds coming from abroad, training bases being present in Pakistan, right? So India declared J&K as a disturbed area. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act was extended, and a call was made to deploy Indian Army in a direct offensive role. Indian Army was given the lead responsibility to conduct counter-insurgency, counter-terrorist operations with the backing from CRPF, J&K police, and other security forces, such as BSF, which guards the line of control, Assam Rifles, which also has been deployed in J&K for counter-insurgency, and even NSG later, the National Security Guards, the Black Cat Commandos are also used for counter-terror operations. But the primary responsibility lies with the Indian Army. The Northern Command of Indian Army, based at Udhampur near Jammu, has the prime responsibility to counter insurgency and terrorism. So it works closely with J&K police, CRPF, BSF, and other central forces in coordination with the intelligence agencies, with IB, RAW, military intelligence, etc. So this has become an everlasting fight. The conflict continues to this day. The terrorism continues till date. But the scale of violence has definitely gone down. From 2003 onwards, definitely there has been a decline in the scale of violence that has been seen. This decline happened mainly because of two reasons. The decline happened because of two reasons. One was because of India's response. The effective security operations, better border management, border security, better intelligence gathering. IB and RAW especially, they infiltrated many terror groups. They targeted many terrorist organizations. We targeted the terror bases as well that existed across the LOC. We tried to cut the financial flow to these terror groups from Pakistan. So, all these targeted operations of India, intelligence and security operations, they yielded results and they brought these groups under pressure. It contributed to the decline of terrorism. Second, changing geopolitics played a big role. The United States became a very good friend of India after 2001. After the 9/11 attacks, as I told you, the US needed a reliable partner for counterterrorism, for sharing intelligence. And India was that partner because India had a considerable influence in Afghanistan, Pakistan region, where all the terror groups were present, including Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda and Taliban, they were the American targets after 9/11 attacks. 9/11 attacks was a turning point which was carried out by Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda was nurtured in Afghanistan, which was ruled by the Taliban government. Please remember, Taliban was in power from 1996 to 2001. It was under this Taliban government that Al Qaeda had been nurtured, and Taliban refused to give up Al Qaeda after 9/11 attacks. It refused to give up Osama bin Laden. The links of these groups with Pakistan had been clearly exposed. The connections of Al Qaeda, Taliban with ISI and Pakistani army had been clearly exposed. So US needed a more reliable partner like India. So after 2001, India US started developing a close security defense partnership. It all started in the domain of intelligence cooperation. Right? Cold War had come to an end by 91, right? Russia was not the same as Soviet Union. So US was opening up to India. China was also on the rise. It needed a democratic country in the region to counter China as well. So all these geopolitical developments pushed US closer to India. And as we developed a security partnership, it did help bring some pressure on Pakistan. Don't forget, both India and Pakistan had become nuclear powers by then. There were heightened tensions in South Asia from 1998 to 2001. We came very close to a nuclear conflict. We tested our nuclear weapons in 98 at Pokhran. Right? After India tested nuclear weapons, Pakistan also retaliated with its own nuclear tests. Then we went to a war, the Kargil War. At a time when both India and Pakistan had nuclear weapons, both the countries fought a conflict at Kargil. Then the parliament attacks carried out by Jaish-e-Mohammed. In 2001, Jaish-e-Mohammed attacked the Indian parliament, pushing India to think of a military option. The Vajpayee government launched Operation Parakram to punish Pakistan by going to war. But the war didn't happen because India took a lot of time to mobilize the troops. Operation Parakram became a failure for India. But still, India and Pakistan came very close to fighting another war, that too when they had nuclear weapons in hand. So these events from 98 to 2001 had created a lot of tensions in the region, and the whole world was worried that a nuclear war might happen between India and Pakistan. So there was a lot of international pressure on Pakistan and India as well to reduce tensions, to talk to each other. So at this point, Prime Minister Vajpayee adopted a more moderate, flexible approach towards Pakistan. He reached out to Pakistan, held several rounds of talks. He had met with Nawaz Sharif. He went to Lahore, held the historic Lahore summit. Later, Pervez Musharraf, who had become the dictator, the president of Pakistan after a military coup, he came to India. He participated in the Agra summit where Musharraf met with Vajpayee. The US was trying to push India-Pakistan towards talks. So all these geopolitical developments, which we will study more in international relations, helped in toning the tensions down. And this led Pakistan to reiterate the ceasefire in 2003. Pakistan made a new commitment that we will uphold the 1949 ceasefire, which was agreed under the Karachi Agreement. The Karachi Agreement had ended the India-Pakistan war, the first war of 1947. It was through Karachi Agreement, ceasefire line was made the formal de facto boundary, and both sides had committed to maintain the ceasefire, to not open fire against each other, to not target each other. So in 2003, India-Pakistan made a fresh commitment to uphold the 1949 ceasefire. So following this, there was a slight reduction in infiltration. We saw a slight decline in terrorism, at least from 2003 till 2007. This was a relatively peaceful period. Understood? The initiatives of Prime Minister Vajpayee was carried forward by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh built upon the progress and achieved something remarkable with Musharraf. Direct talks were opened, back channel negotiations were going on. So things were slightly improving between India, Pakistan, and the scale of infiltration terrorism in J&K had also slightly declined. Understood? But then Pakistan always goes back to its old dirty tactics. Pakistan is not reliable. Maybe one leader might reach out, try to make some peace with India, but there will be others who will disrupt that. Usually, the deep state of Pakistan, which is the army and the ISI, they do not want good ties with India at any cost. Even if a particular leader reaches out, like Nawaz Sharif, later Musharraf also moderated, tried to stabilize the relationship with Manmohan Singh. Imran Khan also made an attempt with Prime Minister Modi. Whenever the civilian leaders get closer to India and if they are making some progress, the deep state will always disrupt the progress by launching major attacks against India. Either they will launch an attack on an Indian city, or they will scale infiltration into Kashmir. This has been a preferred tactic of the Pakistani deep state because they want the relations to be always on the boil. They want this relationship to keep boiling all the time. They don't want any normalcy here. They want India to be triggered. So as India is triggered, they can project India as the enemy. They can keep projecting India as the enemy, which gives prominence to the Pakistani army and the ISI. This is the problem with the dual power center that exists here in Pakistan. The civilian government is virtually powerless. It's only there for the namesake. Pakistan is a namesake democracy. It has elections, it has democracy just for the sake of it. In reality, the authority is largely controlled by the deep state, by the army. The army general is the most powerful leader along with the ISI. So for them to remain powerful, for them to remain relevant, they want a permanent enemy, which is India. So whenever there is a slight improvement, we have seen this pattern. It's a repeat pattern. They will disrupt the relationship by launching some kind of attack against India. Either a major attack on a city by using Lashkar or Jaish-e-Mohammed, or increased infiltration in Kashmir to scale up violence in Kashmir. Either of the things will be done. So from 2008, we not only saw the Mumbai attacks, which disrupted the relationship, we saw an increase in violence in Kashmir as well. From 2008 to at least 2012, there was again an increase in terrorism. And not just terrorism. Along with terrorism, we saw an increase in street violence. This was ISI's new strategy to use mobs to target Indian forces. Right? Mobs are encouraged to protest, throw stones, pelt stones at Indian forces. Then more local youth were radicalized on social media primarily in Kashmir. Young students, young engineers, etc. They were radicalized and they would start these local terror groups and join Pakistan sponsored terrorist organizations. So we saw an uptick in terrorism and violence again. Following this, there was a slight decline. So this is like a cyclical violence that has been created by Pakistan. Right? Every time there is an improvement, Pakistan will do something to scale up the violence in Kashmir and also across India. Is that clear? Now, we will discuss the attacks that have happened across Indian cities. We will discuss the developments in Kashmir that will come later. Now, let's see what India has done to counter the terrorism and insurgency in Kashmir. Let's discuss the mitigating efforts and then we will wrap up this topic by talking about the latest developments, some recent attacks, and what political, constitutional developments have happened. Right? So that will be the last part of the discussion here. So, to counter terrorism in Kashmir from 1987-89, obviously India first adopted the security approach. This was clearly a major security problem that threatened our integrity and sovereignty. There was a clear external involvement, a foreign state involvement. So, under AFSPA, tremendous powers were given to the security forces. So, effective security operations, as I mentioned, played a big role in bringing down the scale of violence. The intelligence operations by IB, RAW, and others, the counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist operations by the army with the other security forces, along with improved security along the line of control to tackle infiltration. All these measures played a big role in bringing down terrorism and insurgency. See, when it comes to infiltration, Pakistan has always given extensive support for the terrorists to infiltrate into India. Let me explain what kind of support Pakistan has given them. After these terrorists are further radicalized and trained and given funds and weapons, they are pushed across the line of control into India with Pakistani support. See, at the line of control, Indian forces maintain a constant vigilance. The BSF, Indian Army, they are maintaining a constant high alert. They have even deployed a lot of technology to check infiltration, from trying to fence the border to deploying CCTV cameras, using satellites and drones for aerial surveillance, using motion detectors, then laser thermal sensors, night vision goggles. All such advanced technologies are being used along the border to check infiltration. But still, terrorists can infiltrate into India. Because what Pakistan does is that Pakistani border guarding forces, they deliberately violate the ceasefire. The ceasefire that they were supposed to uphold, they deliberately break that and open fire against Indian positions to distract the Indian troops during night time. During the cover of the dark, right, during night time, Pakistani troops, especially the border guarding forces, they open heavy firing, not just through rifles and guns, they even fire mortars and even they start shelling sometimes, targeting Indian positions. This distracts the Indian troops and the BSF and creates an opportunity for the terrorists to sneak across the LOC into India. And Pakistan has also dug tunnels. It has supported the terrorists to create underground tunnels below the LOC where they can sneak into India. So that is the extensive state support which has been given for cross-border infiltration. So India's improved border security, improved intelligence gathering, improved covert operations, effective counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist operations, they have collectively helped in bringing down the scale of infiltration and terrorism. But of course, this problem cannot be tackled just by the security approach, because there is a genuine root cause. There is some element of genuine root cause that affected the Kashmiri youth, which is the lack of development, lack of integration with the Indian Union. So, to address that, we have to focus on the developmental approach as well. The developmental approach is equally important in Kashmir because there does exist some genuine root causes. The impact on education and employment, the poor healthcare and standard of living of the people, the lack of opportunities, right? This is something that affects the people of J&K, especially the youth. So if you have to pull away the youth from the influence of the terrorists and Pakistan, you need to create opportunities for them, provide better education, create better infrastructure, create employment opportunities, provide them more options, more exposure to the rest of India. So all these developmental strategies have to be followed along with maintaining a political dialogue. There should be constant engagement with the political parties, leaders, representatives. This is very, very important. Maintaining the political democratic process is critical in such conflict zones where there are genuine root causes. Security approach will help you, but it will not entirely deal with the challenge. The political democratic process is extremely important. Maintain constant dialogue with all stakeholders. Ensure that welfare is prioritized. This is the approach that India has been trying to take. We have launched many initiatives, many schemes, many programs. For example, confidence building measures were initiated to build a dialogue with people of J&K, the separatist leaders, and also with Pakistan. Some of you might have heard about a group called the Hurriyat Conference. The Hurriyat Conference is a coalition of Kashmiri separatists. Various Kashmiri separatist groups and the separatist leaders, they have formed a coalition group called the Hurriyat or the Hurriyat Conference. Some separatist groups are only political. They only raise the political demand for separatism. They don't engage in direct violence. There are some violent separatist groups as well, like JKLF, Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, which is declared as a terrorist organization. So all these separatist elements, right, they're part of the Hurriyat. The political and also the armed groups, they're all part of the Hurriyat. Now, previous governments have often engaged with the Hurriyat Conference. The Vajpayee government, Manmohan Singh government, and few others. They have seen the Hurriyat as a stakeholder in the Kashmir dispute. Because see, whether you like it or not, the separatists are also stakeholders in this conflict. Because they are Indian citizens. We are not talking about Lashkar-e-Toiba. We are not talking about Jaish-e-Mohammed. We are not talking about Pakistani terrorists. We are talking about Kashmiri separatists who are Indians. Just like we are open to talking to Naxals, just like we are open to talking to Northeast insurgents to resolve the conflict, India has been open to talk to Hurriyat as well in the past. Few governments have seen them as stakeholders, maintained contact with them, dialogue with them. We had even allowed Hurriyat leaders to meet with Pakistani leaders. That was the dialogue that was followed before. But now the Modi government has changed the approach. The Modi government has strictly suspended any talks with separatists. Is that clear? Now, this policy of the Modi government is highly debatable and controversial. Why? Because the same Modi government has been talking to Bodo insurgents and signing the Bodo Accord. Recently in Manipur, it negotiated with UNLF and signed a peace accord. It is negotiating with many other Northeast insurgent groups. Then why not negotiate with Kashmiri insurgents? Right? Because whether you like it or not, they are a stakeholder, right? They were the ones who triggered the separatist movement. Just like you talk with other separatists and insurgents to resolve the conflict, ideally you should be talking to all the entities. You should talk to students, political parties and leaders from the state. You should talk to lawyers, the local people, the businessmen, right? And you should talk to separatist leaders as well. That is how you can bring everyone together to initiate a political dialogue process. But the current government believes otherwise. It has said we shouldn't talk to separatists, and it has suspended all talks with the Hurriyat. So this is a debatable, controversial policy because the same government is talking to other separatists. If it was a principled position, it's fine. If government is not talking to any separatists, then that is the government's policy. But you can't have a different approach for different insurgencies and different separatist movements. So that is where the Modi government has faced criticism, that it is not engaging enough with the people of J&K. Attempts have been made to improve people to people contacts between J&K and POK. This is another political, welfare, economic measure that has been taken up. Because when partition happened and later when Pakistan captured POK, many families, Kashmiri families, got separated. Their cultural bonds, familial bonds have been broken permanently. Border trade has been ruined. So to promote border trade across the line of control, to promote the cultural ties between the separated families, in the past, when things were slightly better between India and Pakistan, we had allowed people of J&K to meet with families on the other side in POK. They could move around, they could continue their border trade. There was even a bus service that was started by Prime Minister Vajpayee connecting Srinagar with Muzaffarabad. Muzaffarabad is the capital of POK, right? Srinagar being the capital of J&K. So bus services were started, connectivity was established, movement was encouraged to promote local economy, to promote cultural ties. This was a big step, a big welfare initiative. But right now, all these initiatives have been suspended. Following the recent terror attacks Pakistan carried out against India, all these initiatives we had, they have been suspended. In fact, since Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's era, since then, after Mumbai attacks, all these friendly economic and cultural initiatives we had, everything has come to a stop. So previously, there was a attempt by the government, a political attempt to reunite these separated families, to establish direct connectivity, relax the cross-border movement so people could move around and drive development in the region. We have held periodic dialogues with all the groups, including the separatists. Various committees have been set up and they have been sent as special committees to engage with all the political elements in J&K to find a solution to the conflict. Like under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, a committee of experts was created. Top civil society experts were brought in. A three-member committee was formed, and they were asked to visit J&K and meet with political elements, discuss with them, meet the students, the locals, the businesses, meet the leaders, and generate their opinion on how we can make governance better, development better in J&K. Right? So such outreaches were attempted before. And a reconstruction plan, the Prime Minister's reconstruction plan for J&K was also launched in 2004. A dedicated skill development program was launched called Himayat to provide vocational training and skill training so that the youth become employable. They can find employment opportunities. The Indian Army was a part of Himayat under its Civic Action Program. As part of Civic Action Program initiatives taken up by security forces to gain the trust of the locals, Indian Army officers were part of Himayat. They were training the local youth, training them for government exams, banking exams, arranging training classes for them so they could become employable in the industry. They could find jobs or start their own small enterprises. There has been a lot of focus on creating advanced infrastructure. because this will not just serve a security purpose, it will serve an economic purpose. Because see, in J&K, the terrain is very complex. It's the Himalayan mountains, high altitude region. During the winter season, when there is snowfall, many regions get completely cut off from the rest of the country. So this affects movement of goods, movement of people, and more importantly, the movement of our troops. Right? Indian Army has to mobilize troops towards Pakistan and also the Chinese border. Both are very important security priorities for us. So it's important to have all-weather infrastructure. So in the last 2 decades, under Vajpayee government, Manmohan Singh government, and now under the Modi government, key strategic projects have been taken up, including tunnels that pass under mountains. These are all-weather tunnels that will give all-weather connectivity. The Banihal Kozhikode tunnel, railway bridges, advanced roads and tunnel infrastructure is being set up, along with investments in power plants on the Jhelum and Chenab and Tavi River. Many hydro projects have been planned and are being executed to solve the electricity problem. Advanced roads, bridges, and tunnels are being constructed to provide all-weather connectivity throughout the year to improve economic activities and also enable the security forces to move around easily. The Indian Army will have to quickly mobilize towards the LOC and also towards LAC, towards China. So having such infrastructure is important, not just for security reasons and strategic reasons, but also for economic and cultural reasons. There has been focus on reviving the tourism industry. As you know, Kashmir is a paradise. It's like the Switzerland of India. It has tremendous tourist potential, right? But the violence, the instability has ruined the tourism industry. So a lot of attempts have been made to revive the tourism industry. It can bring a lot of revenue, create numerous jobs for the local people, driving development and welfare. So these were some of the developmental approaches that were taken up in the past, along with the security approach that was implemented. But recently, we are facing a challenge. In 2014, there was a new government in India under Prime Minister Modi. Even PM Modi continued in the footsteps of Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. Just like Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh had reached out to Pakistan with a hand of friendship, even PM Modi made an attempt. He reached out to his counterpart, Nawaz Sharif. Both the leaders made a honest attempt, a genuine attempt to restore normalcy in the relationship. And it was actually doing well until 2015. For slightly more than 1 year, India-Pakistan were getting closer, making progress in the relationship, right? And as you can expect, this progress was disrupted again with a series of attacks and destabilization in Kashmir. That's why I told you this is a repeat pattern. This is a pattern that is established by the deep state, which has become a rogue state in Pakistan. They do not want the friendly ties to develop. They do not want the Indian government to get closer to the Pakistani government. They do not want any normalcy in the relationship, because that is bad news for the army and the ISI. They will lose their relevance. That will threaten their authority, their control over the Pakistani state. Whenever there is an improvement, they will disrupt this by using their proxies, by launching terror attacks, and by creating destabilization in J&K. That is exactly what we saw happening. Now, since Pakistan was under international pressure, now please pay attention here. Pakistan was under international pressure to not attack Indian cities and civilians. Correct? This is something we have already understood. It was under a lot of pressure ever since the Mumbai attacks to not use groups like Lashkar and Jaish-e-Mohammed to attack Indian cities and Indian civilian population. Right? So they needed a new strategy to hit India, to disrupt the progress that the relationship was making. So this new strategy is very evident. If you can analyze what has happened in the last 7 years, you will easily understand what is happening. Right? The last 7, 8 years have clearly established a pattern. The attacks that Lashkar and Jaish are carrying out is now focused on military bases of India, especially near the border in Punjab, near line of control in J&K. This has become the prime target because attacks on these military sites will not get the same kind of sympathy and the pressure that Pakistan would get if it were to attack a city or a civilian population. There is a difference between a military target and a civilian target. Is that clear? So we saw attacks happening at Gurdaspur. Gurdaspur is a border district in Punjab. So Jaish-e-Mohammed has become the preferred weapon of choice for Pakistan. It's been using Jaish-e-Mohammed primarily to target the military sites. And we saw an attack at a military position near Gurdaspur, which is a border district. Then came the deadly Pathankot air base attack. Indian Air Force has a forward base at Pathankot in Punjab. It's a major forward operating base focused on Pakistan. Right? When we go to war, when we have offensive operations against Pakistan, it is led from here, from Pathankot. This major air base was targeted by Jaish-e-Mohammed. Right? Following this, we witnessed even more serious attacks in 2016. The Uri attacks, again carried out by Jaish-e-Mohammed. Several Indian Army soldiers were martyred. Then in 2019, Jaish-e-Mohammed carried out a suicide bombing targeting a CRPF convoy, and 40 CRPF Jawans were martyred at Pulwama. These were major acts of escalation by Pakistan. Right? Initially, when the Gurdaspur and Pathankot attacks happened, India did not retaliate because Modi government was pursuing a friendly approach. We criticized the attack. We asked Pakistan to cooperate in investigation, but we did not retaliate and punish Pakistan. But this kept repeating. Parallelly, in Jammu and Kashmir, new age terrorists were being created. Have you heard of Burhan Wani? These are youngsters, hardly 19, 20, 22 years old, still in their colleges, just they would have graduated. Such youngsters who are comfortable with internet and social media, they were radicalized and they were made the poster boys of Kashmiri terrorism by Pakistan. India targeted them. Burhan Wani was killed by the Indian Army with a targeted intelligence operation. With the killing of Burhan Wani, large-scale unrest broke out in Kashmir, mob unrest. And this was instigated by Pakistan. This has been Pakistan's game plan. All right? Stone pelting incidents became common and more serious. Mobs were being encouraged, guided by ISI and ISI agents. Right? Few Kashmiri separatist terrorists who work for ISI, they would finance the mobs, incentivize them to come out on the street and to pelt stones, especially when Indian Army would be conducting a live operation. Let's say the army has received intelligence that terrorists are hiding in a building. Immediately, the RR, the Rashtriya Rifles, along with special forces, will launch a strike. So when a live encounter is going on, local mobs will assemble. They will pelt stones on the forces trying to disrupt the operation. This is a major threat to the forces and to the civilians. The attempt is deliberate to disrupt the operation. And if terrorists are killed, right, Their bodies are taken in a rally, in a procession, leading to even more mob violence and riots. So this has become a new concern for India. It's a new strategy that ISI has been using to further add fuel to the fire. Now, in such a difficult situation, Indian forces will retaliate. They will use some force to contain the mobs. Along with Indian Army, CRPF, which is deployed here for mob control and riot management, it could fire tear gas, shoot water cannons, or even open fire if required. And it also uses something called a pellet gun. Indian Army and CRPF, they use pellet guns to disperse mobs. Pellet guns are usually not lethal, meaning it will not kill a person. But problem is it's very injurious. These pellet guns, they fire many small metal pieces, all right, and it punctures your face, your body. It leaves behind very bad scars on your body, and if it hits the eye, you will lose your vision. So when such mob control happens by opening fire, by using tear gas, by firing pellet guns, many people will get injured. Some might get killed. Women, children might get killed. Old people might get injured. Now, these visuals are not good. When media captures these pictures, these videos, it is not a good image for India. That is exactly what Pakistan wants. Pakistan takes these pictures and visuals to the United Nations, to Organization of Islamic Cooperation. It internationalizes the Kashmir issue by doing this. This is a new strategy that we have seen. It will allege human right violations by Indian forces. It will bring the issue at the UN and OIC, where it has a lot of support. It's very influential. So it will internationalize the Kashmir dispute, bring more attention to the Kashmir dispute by instigating such mob violence, along with the sponsorship of terrorism. So this is the challenge that India has been dealing with. So finally, the Modi government also got frustrated. After all the hand of friendship, right? The time had come for punishment. India suspended the friendly ties, the talks, everything stopped. The talks were suspended, and India retaliated for the Uri attacks by conducting surgical strikes. Indian Special Forces from the army, the para commandos, they carried out a precise surgical strike, hitting the terror launch pads across the LOC. Multiple terror launch pads were targeted, where terrorists were waiting to infiltrate into India. It was a very successful covert operation. So this was a military option that had been used to punish Pakistan. After Pulwama attacks, the Indian Air Force was used in Balkot airstrikes to conduct a targeted strike at terror camps located at Balkot. Is that clear? It was a daring military operation. 12 Indian Mirage fighter jets. They penetrated Pakistani airspace for the first time after 1971. They went deep inside Pakistan because Balkot is quite far away from India. It's closer to the Afghan border. It's in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So Indian fighter jets headed towards Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, reached Balkot, dropped precision bombs on these terror camps and headed back. So this led to an escalation. Pakistan treated this as an act of war and it retaliated as well the next day. Pakistani Air Force entered Indian airspace. It led to a aerial dogfight between Indian and Pakistani Air Force, and both sides shot down one fighter jet. Right? India shot down a Pakistani F-16 given by the US. Then Pakistan also shot down an Indian MiG-21. And unfortunately, the Indian pilot, Wing Commander Abhinandan, landed in POK. He ejected from his flight and he landed in POK and he was captured as a POW. But following negotiations, he was released the next day by Pakistan and handed over to India. So since then, the tensions have remained very high between India and Pakistan. There has been no normalcy in the last 4 or 5 years. Kashmir remains as it is, right? Of course, there are a lot of changes regarding Article 370 and the reorganization of the state. So let's discuss this in the next class. So, as of now, you've understood everything about J&K terrorism and insurgency, the role of Pakistan, how India has been dealing with it. All right. So, tomorrow we will discuss the changes related to Article 370, the reorganization. Of course, I'll not go into the polity aspect. I'll be covering this from an internal security perspective. Then we'll discuss terrorism seen across India, the pan India terrorism experienced across Indian cities. And we'll wrap up this chapter by discussing India's counter-terror approach. What anti-terror laws we have, what anti-terror institutions do we have, what efforts has India made at the global level to counter terrorism. So all these things will be covered tomorrow, and we are going to wrap up this module in the next class. So that is it for today. I'll take a quick look at your doubt, your questions, and after that, we can end the session. Stephen is asking what kind of prelims questions can we expect from this chapter? From this chapter, you can expect a few questions on some important facts. Maybe a question on some important terrorist organization. Let's say there are some global terror groups. UPSC might ask a map-based question, places in news question, as to where does this terror group operate, in which country. So that could be a possible question. There could be question on India's anti-terror laws, a question on UAPA, which we are going to study tomorrow, question on NIA, which we will discuss in the next class, or in general, there could be even conceptual questions maybe. Like, for example, at the UN and FATF, there are few measures to tackle terrorism and terrorist financing. All right, we will be studying this in the coming topics. So based on that, the 1267 Sanctions Committee, then FATF has certain measures against terrorist financing. Based on that, you can expect prelims questions. Alok is asking, sir, extremist groups like UNLF have recently signed a peace pact with India. What would be their future in the Indian state? Can they be allowed to act as a political party or a pressure group? Yes, absolutely. That is the purpose of a peace process. You allow the extremist group to come back into mainstream politics. There is an example for that in Mizoram. When we study Northeast insurgency, we will discuss this. A former insurgent group labeled as a terrorist organization by India surrendered. We signed a peace accord with this group. Mizoram became peaceful and stable, and that outfit became a political party. It contested elections, won the elections, formed the state government. The terrorist leader, the insurgent leader, became the chief minister of Mizoram. That is the beauty of a peace process. Peace process is designed for conflict resolution. So it means insurgent groups can be allowed to enter mainstream politics. It has happened in Mizoram and in other parts as well. So we will discuss this more in Northeast insurgency. Kishan is asking, on the name of fundamental rights, Western countries are saving Khalistan. Is it only a political motive? Can we say extremist activity, human right violence by state work simultaneously? Is covert war appropriate word for exam? Can we give examples of this? Okay, first, your last question. You can use the word covert war in your exams, nothing wrong with it. But again, don't make it your personal opinion. Don't say that India is waging a covert war. Don't ever say that. Present this as someone else's opinion. See, you can say that it's alleged, it's speculated that India is involved in covert operations. Or let's say you can present it more diplomatically. Like Sri Lanka alleged that India was sponsoring LTTE. B. Raman has written that India waged a covert war to target the Khalistan movement in Pakistan. So something like that. You have to present it as someone else's opinion, based on someone else's stand. So then it is not your direct opinion, right? So that is where you have to be a little careful. Coming to your other question, I think I addressed that during the discussion. Are Western countries, in a way, saving Khalistan movement in the name of fundamental rights? As I said, they're not directly sponsoring or supporting them, at least as far as we know, but definitely they're tolerating them. Because in the name of democracy, they tolerate all kinds of views and opinions, right? They think this is just a part of free speech and expression, but they don't realize that these outfits can engage in violence, in terrorism. They could threaten India's integrity and sovereignty, right? So that is where Western countries are getting it wrong. That's why many experts believe Western countries might be allowing this to happen because they want leverage on India. They want to pressurize India to change its stand on Russia. Maybe that is a possibility. We don't know. So we can't speculate, but it's good to theorize. It's good to discuss that as a theory. So that is about the role of Western countries. All right. So guys, these are the questions. Let's wrap up today's session. We'll meet again tomorrow. We'll complete this whole module and then we'll be starting with Northeast insurgency. I hope everything is clear today. I hope you guys have liked the session. Do let me know in the comments. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.